Hello and welcome to Steven University, the 342nd most popular TV and film category podcast on Apple Podcasts in Sweden.
Boom!
I mean, you know, they say dreams can't come true, Chris.
They can, Dan.
And we
They
laugh
can.
in the
If
face
you're-
of those dreams.
Yeah. If you're in Sweden and you want to listen to a TV and film podcast,
Yeah.
and the first 341 don't take your fancy, boom. Daniel Frederick Doolan and I are grabbing ourselves a listener.
Yeah, we are.
I'm very proud. Legitimately, it's random and it's kooky, but it's amazing.
It is fun to know that, because I must have set up at some point some sort of alert for if we hit the charts and forgotten it, because obviously we've never hit the charts. We don't have enough listeners for that, evidently. But like, it was so funny to think that, like, so I got this email yesterday and it was like, "You've charted," and I'm like, "Oh, that's it! Oh, we've charted! What's happening?" And I click on it with so much excitement, and with every word, that excitement went from excitement to confusion. Like, this is so specific.
Yeah. You want to know the best thing? After you sent me that, like, I shit you not, 5 minutes later, I'd earlier in the day, I was meant to be doing a talk on video, with, like, as part of my job. I was doing this, running this talk on video, and the talk got cancelled, for reasons out of anyone's control. And just in case you were like, no one wanted to come to Chris's talk, no wonder, I've heard him talk. They were like external reasons beyond anyone's control. And earlier in the day, I got an email that's from someone that said, "Oh, I was attending the talk. Now it's been cancelled. Is there any way we can talk separately?" And I'm like, "Sure." Email back. You send me that message. 5 minutes later, that person emails me and they go, "Oh, I didn't actually want to talk about video. I understand that you know quite a bit about podcasting." Like, that's never happened. And I really wanted to go, "Know about podcasting, mate? 342nd on the Apple Film and TV chart in Sweden. What don't I know about podcasting, my friend?" Like,
Amazing. Yeah. Yeah.
maybe that's how they how they found out, because I was like, how do they know that? Like, they've been they're in Sweden. They're on the charts.
Yeah. So I guess all of that, we round that up by just saying thanks, Sweden. I guess.
It's awesome. Thank you. It's
I
legitimately
can't tell if it's unusual levels of popularity in Sweden or very low levels of competition in Sweden. Like, it's one or the other.
Who knows? But I legitimately, like, as much as we mock it, it is cool. And we are very grateful.
Nice. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Yeah, very happy. So let's get to what we're here for today. Now, I've got to tell you, Chris, two things about this, right? First of all, I'm so fucking excited. I nearly bought popcorn today. Like, that is how excited I am. But number two, I felt anxious all day. Not because I'm worried about this or anything like that. I cannot wait. I think this is going to be brilliant. I felt anxious because for the first time since we've been doing this podcast, I had nothing to prepare. And every time I remembered we were recording it, my brain went, "Panic, you've not prepared anything. What do? Dan, prepare something." So, like, I just had to distract myself today because I had the day off. So I just watched movies and, like, I just had to take my mind, because every time I got, like, this weird pang of anxiety because I prepared nothing for this podcast. So I am very excited.
I mean, I've not prepared much more.
I am genuinely looking forward to this. I think this is going to be brilliant.
I wish, honestly, so for those not in the know, we were doing a Q&A, a loose episode a few weeks ago, and I raised the question, what would you, and bearing in mind it was a question that was meant to be answered on the fly in the moment, what would you pitch if someone comes to you and they say, "Right, we're doing a live action Steven Universe movie. Everyone's worried it's going to be Avatar. Everyone's panicking, but it's all right because they've hired Chris or Dan from Steven Universe. What would you do?" And the idea evolved into two separate episodes. One where Dan pitched an idea last week, and one where I'm pitching an idea this week. Mm-hmm. If you've not listened to Dan's, please go back and listen to Dan's. I imagine if you've not listened, you're a big fan of the show, Steven Universe. Dan's is a much better pitch for that. Dan that laid out rules for himself. He didn't just go a bit crazy. So I've tried to, for the sake of interest, I've tried to take a different approach to Dan. That's been a very deliberate conscious choice. Dan cast the original actors. I've cast other people. Dan stuck to certain rules that really closely aligned it to the fans, i.e. it's always from Steven's perspective. Nothing goes against the characters' kind of stories and characteristics. I've not necessarily broken them, but I've certainly been more flexible with them than Dan was. I'm really concerned. And I'm sure you felt this way. I've come to this going, fuck, I wish I had like a month. Do you know, like another month? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and what's really annoying with mine was I don't think I didn't know how deep I was going to go with mine until like much closer to like. So I think from the Q&A to the date we recorded, I think I did have about a month. But I think I didn't do anything the first 2 weeks. I think I had a vague notion and I put a few like loose ideas together of just like. I think I put maybe the rules together in those first 2 weeks, but then didn't actually put it together. So I think I had to I scrambled like an idiot, like I always do when I've got a deadline, which is like do nothing, then panic for 2 weeks.
That's what I did. I kind of had the cast. And then, like, we did yours, and it's you basically you spiral. The reason I had another month is because essentially Dan had a third draft or a second draft of a plot summary.
Yes,
I've got. Sorry, I'm just getting called by someone. I've got the same person who called me last time we recorded. Weird.
Yeah, and you were you were really worried because you're like, this person doesn't normally call me. So did we find out what they wanted from you last time?
Yeah, nothing. But it's a director from work, so it's like they don't usually call out of kind of office hours. Gotcha. So but there was no problem, and I'm sure if my phone rings again, we will pause proceedings and I will call them back quickly. But so I've got like the first draft of a beat sheet. So the difference between the two is a plot summary is kind of has that detail fleshed out, and the problem is, Dan, I don't know if you did this, but you snowball. You go, right, I want to end up here. Well, I've got to do this then, which means I've got to do this. How would that look? Oh, that would look like this scene. And you write like a line of dialogue. And then like, so some bits are fleshed out and some bits aren't. And I wish I had the opportunity to flesh it all out. It's my own fault. But what I'm saying is, please don't anyone expect the level of detail that Dan's plot summary went into. I'm sure you'll be able to pick a lot of holes in mine, and I know there were some questions about some decisions Dan made. Unless you've got like a month to dedicate yourself to it, like I'm sure Dan's going to bring up the stuff, and I brought up stuff with him that we will have got to. But that's not what this is necessarily about. This is just a fun, what is it exercise. I'm just aware. I can just see the comments like, but Chris, if you're doing this, what about this? And I'm worried people will hate it. But
that's the thing. Is like
take it for the fun exercise it's meant.
I had this exact same issue, and I had the same thing as you, where it started simple and then I figured this out, and then I knew that because I had to do that, I had to do this, and it just sort of it snowballs, and then you've suddenly got essentially my document, 8,000 words, whatever I was thinking, God knows.
Well, mine's 3,000, I think.
What's that, sorry?
I think mine's 3,000.
That is a good number. Like, that is probably a lot more reasonable. But it's funny. What I love is that the shift in your approach and tone and idea, because from when you started last week's podcast, because I was looking for a quote for something else, and I checked the beginning of last week's, not last week's, but the podcast where we did my pitch. And at the beginning, you're like, "Oh, I'm so nervous. This is insane. Dan's written like a manifesto. Like I
stand by that."
Yeah, so and it's so funny to think that now here we are with your manifesto.
Yeah, a little bit, but I wish I'd got to this point earlier and then fleshed out this manifesto and fixed the problems that I know you and others are going to pick apart.
Yeah, well, no, the thing is, and I said this to the people who gave me feedback for mine, where like certain things didn't quite make sense. The way that writing generally tends to work is and I'll make this point right up top so that we maybe avoid that, because I think it's very important to know. Generally speaking, and I can't speak for every writer, but for myself, the way I write is every time I take a pass at it, I'm fixing problems I already know exist, but my brain can't fix every problem in one swoop. I've got to go through it, and every time I work out something I didn't work out before, or spot something I didn't spot before, and it smooths out over many drafts until you eventually get a thing that's got less plot holes, less logic gaps, more like just a smooth narrative where you've taken out extra steps that were only there for no reason, because the way a narrative sometimes unfolds, you end up adding extra sequences that each go, that actually doesn't need to be there because we can just skip from A to C here. We don't really need B. And as you smooth it out, it gets a lot better. So obviously the thing I read out on here was it was a draft and therefore had things that I knew were wrong with it that I hadn't had a chance to sort out yet. People were pointing those out and I was like, yeah, absolutely, this is something that would be fixed in a or fleshed out in a subsequent draft if I was to continue working on it. The same will absolutely be true here. So what we're looking for here are core ideas rather than the specifics. There'll be some fun specifics I'm sure Chris has worked out, but the core ideas are what we should be really judging it on.
Yeah, I would want this to be judged on, and it will become clear at the end, and probably as I'm going through it. In the same way that I think yours should be judged on how well you've stuck to the rules, because that was your big aim. I think mine should be judged on whether I've put together beats and a loose, assembly of A to C that achieves what I wanted to achieve, which is different to what you wanted to achieve, but I don't want to spoil where I'm going with it. So let's start, Dan, with casting. Which for me, I imagine, will take a little bit longer than for you.
Yes, but for those who haven't listened, I'll stop doing this because I think we'll just end up going over my stuff again. I went mostly unknown except for the gems, which I gave the casting to the original actors.
Yeah. So I haven't done that. So this is the kind of thing that gets announced in the lead up, the cast and stuff.
Sure.
I've picked a lot of names that I'm not going to be able to say right. But let's just go for it. So there's some licenses in some places, but I've tried to be more realistic than I thought, actually. So let's go through the cast I have. So playing Stephen, you got to bear in mind that this is a child actor, so there's an element of this actor's probably already too old to play Stephen. So just this is an ideal. This is this actor a few years ago. Yeah,
sure.
So, playing Stephen, Gaten Matarazzo. I'm pretty sure I've not said that right. Who is, of course, from Stranger Things.
Oh, which character is he in Stranger Things?
He is Dustin.
Oh, that's good casting. Yeah, excellent.
So, I think he's got the. So again, he's probably already too old.
He's too old now. Yeah.
Go a bit earlier. Go to the beginning. So he's Dustin, which is the character who ends up with Steve, the one who in the early years is really big into D&D, and this year had kind of a separate storyline with the Russians and Steve. I think he's got that charm. He's got that instant likability. He's had moments of determination where he's been that kind of Stephen child determination you see in his performance in Stranger Things. I think he's I think he's got the great levels of humor and stuff. I think that the trouble with him is he's only really known for one major role. I'm not pitching a Dustin like Stephen. I'm casting that actor to portray his version of Stephen.
Sure.
That's choice number one. What do you think?
Yeah, no, happy. That's a great casting. I think him just prior to Stranger Things would be age wise like the right. I think just before Stranger Things kicked in.
Yes.
But yeah, no, I definitely see what you mean. He's got a certain innocence to him. He's not he's not too gaunt a kid. I think Stephen does have to have a bit of sort of puppy fat, as I suppose you'd call it. I think there's and I think he had a slightly rounder face. Because he was a young kid himself. I think he looks the part, and I think he could definitely pull off the performance. So yeah, absolutely, fully approved. Good call.
There we go. I just need to look up what else my second. So I struggled with Garnet. So the name that Dan had to bleep out the other day,
yes,
was Beyonce.
Yeah, but no, explain the second part of that though, because that wasn't just Beyonce, was it?
Beyonce, and if we revealed Ruby and Sapphire, they would be Michelle Williams and Kelly Rowland.
You're a mad genius. I told Nadia that, and she was so excited at that because she's like, no, they fit the characters as well. She was so excited because they did actually.
Yeah, I know. It would make sense. So here's the logic way. Here's how what my justification was going to be. I mean, Beyonce's arguably the closest human being to Garnet. The swagger,
other than Estelle herself, agreed.
Yeah. And that, by the way, is what I also really, really toyed with. I toyed with breaking my rule and casting Estelle, because in reality, there's no one better to play any of these characters, but there are other interpretations on here that I would be excited to see. I think with Garnet, I'm very excited by my choice, but Estelle is the one that I was really like, oh man, I'm tempted to just cast Estelle and just have her return, but you can't have one return and not the rest. So in it, obviously, and again, this is a really I knew Dan was casting the same, so I deliberately went, well, okay, let's do, because live action Steven Universe, if you say that phrase to a Steven Universe fan, the first thing is, oh, who would play who? So one of us had to do that. So I thought about Beyonce. I didn't, and it's amazing that this was even a factor for me. But genuinely, so my justification for Beyonce was obviously the fit. She'd be awesome. Both Gatton, by the way, and Beyonce, I think, I Googled the people in Steven Universe, and other people have suggested these people, but all of these I thought of myself and then discovered others had thought of. And a few of these I don't think people have. So I was like, well, you could, maybe, I don't know how old her kids are, but maybe they're at an age where they watch Steven Universe and they were like, oh no, Mum, you should definitely play Garnet. And she felt compelled. So that was my first thought. Again, I've not cast Beyonce. And then the Michelle Williams thing and Kelly Rowland thing just seemed like a lot of fun. There's a few reasons I didn't. One, and this is the bit that it's ridiculous that I've even factored this in, she wasn't anywhere, really, promoting The Lion King, and I didn't like that. Why she wasn't doing the foul, unless, maybe I'm wrong, but I just, on all the interviews and stuff, on all the talking heads and press junkets, I didn't see Beyonce. Maybe she's busy, but I just kind of think, I want to cast that. And the way other people in The Lion King talked about working with Beyonce, it was very Beyonce on a pedestal, as she should be, but I want to create a cast where everyone's a star and they genuinely bond. And I'm not saying Beyonce couldn't do that, but the fact that she didn't promote The Lion King and the fact that every single person would watch that and go, that's Beyonce, rather than that's Garnet. Nobody would be able to get over the fact that it's Beyonce in the same way that when I see those clips of The Lion King, I'm not really over the fact that it's Beyonce.
Yeah, and that was the struggle I had, and one of the reasons I ended up going with unknowns at all the existing cast, because depending on the character, because that was my problem, was that I think a lot of the big, you choose very, like I said, someone like Awkwafina would probably make a good Amethyst, but she's Awkwafina. Like she would bring her own audience to it, but that there's a certain sort of, I don't know, people would be it would be difficult to detach her from the role. So yeah,
and we're gonna get that with a lot of my choices, but I think makeup's very important. Like Dan, it's very much a Guardians of the Galaxy Marvel style aesthetic where CG and layers are put onto these actors. It's not just them cosplaying as the characters. Yeah,
I didn't get a chance to say exactly this, but yeah, think Mantis from Guardians. It was my sort of like for the gems, like that sort of
visual approach.
Yeah, so it's like it's a person in makeup, but then that's all enhanced with CG to give it a genuinely alien feel. And I think Mantis is a really brilliant piece of practical and CGI blending sort of like special effects work. So yeah, that was my way for approaching the gems. And we talked about it after we recorded that podcast, and you were like, yeah, I'm pretty much going to do the same, which is absolutely the way to do it. I think that's how it should be handled.
Because it's absolutely the way to do it. Yeah. So you're not having. So I'm like, right, let's not have Beyonce. So let's make a star. Who have I watched and gone, they're fucking brilliant, and they should be in more. So I've cast, in my fictional live-action version of Steven Universe, as Garnet, Lashana Lynch. So for those that don't know, she is going to be in the new James Bond. She was in Bulletproof, a Sky series, and the big one was she played Captain Marvel's friend, the mum of the
Maria Rambeau. I always get the two
Yes.
Rambos mixed up because there's Maria Rambeau and then her daughter. Is it? Maria?
Yeah, she's Maria. She was Maria.
Yeah, great casting. That's a really good.
I think
choice.
she's brilliant.
Yeah, she's very good.
She has and I've watched clips. Mate, I've been watching fucking interviews of people and clips like where I didn't know a variety of work from the people. And I think she's got the dominant presence needed for Garnet, but also the softer, gentle side needed for Garnet. I mean, she puts a lot of that on display in Captain Marvel. She's stunning in that movie. And I think she really has a legitimate presence. And like, if you like image search her, there's poses and there's pictures of her where it feels like a Garnet pose. Like the way she's holding herself and stuff is so dignified, and so she's my Garnet choice.
Good choice. Great casting.
There we go.
I wouldn't have thought of her off the top of my head, but 100%. Just
Yeah, I really did think about this.
Is she the lady from James Bond that's going to be the new 007?
That's the rumor. Yes.
Right. Cool. Yeah.
So
casting,
again, there's an element of this is a world where that's
cast her before she becomes the most famous person on the planet. Yeah.
Sort of thing.
100%.
Yeah. Right. So Pearl, on to Pearl. A choice that I think you'll like because I think you're a big fan of the actress. Constance Wu.
Yes,
is my Pearl.
She was my choice before I decided to go
Was
with the original
she?
cast. Yeah, she was absolutely my choice.
Great. Wow, that's awesome. Because I haven't seen her name. I don't think when I put Constance Wu Steven Universe, nothing came up. So that's you and me, great minds thinking.
Well, she's. I mean, I can't speak for why what your sort of thought process was, but for me, it was when I before I made that final decision. No, I want the original cast back. Constance Wu was the name that came to my head, and I wrote down because, quite simply, she's got a good mix of comedic chops and motherliness in Fresh Off the Boat. She's also a rising star, so she's a good name to put on a show like a movie like this. I think, and again, it's that motherliness. I think she's that not many actresses can really embody the kind of bird mom of Pearl, you know what I mean? It's Constance definitely was the first name, and I've weirdly I've met her in real life, and she is there's a really sort of the only problem with Constance Wu, the only thing I sort of think is she's quite short. She is Pearl is one of the taller ones, and she'd be with the shorty squad, so you'd have to put her in platform shoes or something. But yeah, other than that, she's a great choice.
Yeah, I think in general I tried not to worry too much about height. There's other height issues in my choice. I think that, Thanos, Josh Brolin is a lot smaller than Thanos was. Mark Ruffalo isn't as big as the Hulk. You can try and, in a world where you're making them like that anyway, I think you can try and work around that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think she's exactly the reasons you described. I think she's really funny. I think she picks projects wisely, and I think with Pearl, whoever in this scenario, whoever's playing Pearl, it's the long game they've got to be aware of. Pearl's prominence is going to come much later. I think we've both tried to give the character of Pearl moments and stuff, but I think there's, the early stories, they focus on Steven, they focus on Lapis, whatever. And I think she's the kind of person that can see that and can, be, there's the story of her really wanting Crazy Rich Asians and really pursuing that. And I think she just, in terms of the performance, has the right characteristics that I'm looking for in my Pearl, Dan.
Yeah, I'm I mean, all of the above, 100%. I guess I find it really funny that you got to the same choice as me. I'm really surprised by that, but pleasantly so.
Yeah. Amethyst, it's an obvious choice. This is one that other people have suggested in the past. Any guesses?
Not off the top of my head, nothing. That other people
Rebel
have
Wilson.
suggested. Oh yeah. Rebel Wilson. All right.
Are you not excited about Rebel Wilson?
No. I don't think she's
Fair enough.
I don't think she's funny. Personally, I find her quite annoying. And I think she'd be personally, I think she'd be distracting. But I totally get it. She's a draw. You put her in a movie, it makes money. So no criticism. Just wouldn't be my choice.
Well, I think she'd be great for the role. I've not put her in for money. I've not really. I've cast a lot of great people. I don't think any of my cast is except one maybe, who's not as big a role is like I've not cast The Rock. Do you know what I'm saying? I've not cast Kevin Hart.
Whoa! You're telling me The Rock isn't playing bloody Greg? You're telling me Kevin Hart is an onion?
I'm telling you that exactly. Kevin Hart would be a great onion. It's a great choice for onion.
Imagine just Kevin Hart just stood there, mouth closed, and opens his mouth slowly, and a mouse comes out. I would watch that movie.
I think she's got the right style of humor. I can hear Amethyst's voice in her. Sure. I think she's really good at the physical stuff. I'd love it when you see people do things that are a bit different, and I like the idea of seeing her play a genuine action role. So I know I think she did a film this year with Anne Hathaway where she had a lot of physicality and stuff. So we've seen her do physical stuff, but it's always been played for laughs, whereas Amethyst is played with the sincerity, that side of things. So I think that could be really interesting.
Yeah, I think with the right director, I think you'd be fine. But like, she would, like I said, not for me.
Well, good job you're not casting then, Dan.
Oh no,
no. Greg is again an obvious choice, but I couldn't resist. So Greg is Jack Black. I don't think that one takes much explaining.
No, it doesn't. And that is a name we bleeped out of the last podcast, so I already knew that one was coming. But it's perfect. It's a great choice.
You can imagine him doing it. You can hear it. I think he'd be great. So yeah, Jack Black is my choice for Greg.
Sure. Perfect.
So we're going a bit beyond that, Dan. We got Lapis in this movie.
Okay.
So Lapis isn't a choice I've seen on the internet anyone else say, apart from me. So I think it's mine. It's the one out of all of them. This is the one where I'm like, oh God, I'd love to see that. I'm really, really pleased with this choice. Any guesses?
No. Because I get, again, before I made a final decision on like sticking with the original cast for the gems, like I did put some thought into almost all of them, and I did struggle to think of someone who I thought would really fit Lapis well. So
I'm going for Saoirse Ronan.
Oh, that is really good. That is really good.
A name I probably said wrong. I think every asset of Lapis she could pull off really well.
Yep.
The bits where she has to be steely and determined, the softer side, the panic. I think she kind of looks like Lapis. This is the choice I would most want to see out of all of them. The next one as well, I'm really fond of. But when I came up with that, I was really pleased.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's perfect casting.
Other names, I briefly toyed with Lily James because the gentleness that's in Lily James's performance in Yesterday is what I wanted for Lapis for certain things, but Lily James has done so many other things in other roles. And versatility is a good idea, but I think there's a certain preconception maybe with Lily James and Saoirse Ronan I just got more excited about that choice, but I did for a while toy with Lily James.
I think the problem with Lily James, I think she could pull off the softer, being pleasant with Steven's side, but I think she'd struggle with the coming across as tough and threatening and imposing side. Assuming that you've got that element in your story, which you might not. But like, if we're going by the show, that's a side of Lapis that exists, and if you, from my perspective, like, if you're including that element in the story, I just don't think Lily James can pull that off. But I definitely think Ronan can.
Yeah, I think she's brilliant. So we also, Dan, have Jasper and we have Peridot as well.
Oh wow.
Chucking too much in, if anything, Dan. So, Peridot. For a while, I thought about Melissa Ranch from Big Bang Theory, but I thought she's just a bit too obvious and a bit too well known for playing Bernadette in Big Bang Theory. I think she'd be brilliant. I think she'd be a great choice. I think she looks the part. I think she sounds right. But she's so famous for doing a voice like Peridot's that I just was like,
Yeah, fair.
So, in the end, I went for Mae Whitman, who was in Arrested Development, Parenthood, and Good Girls more recently. So she played the one with the son in Good Girls.
Wait, sorry, my line broke up a little bit there. Can you repeat the choice?
Mae Whitman. So
Mae Whitman. Mate, Arrested Development, Avatar: The Last Airbender, Mae Whitman,
and Good Girls.
Yeah, Mae Whitman's amazing.
I think she'd be brilliant. I think she'd do the feisty stuff. I think she'd do the gentle stuff later on. I think she'd be... Because obviously that's also what you've got to think about. Like, whether the full... In this movie, Peridot might just be straight out villain. In this movie, Lapis might be straight out gentle. But you've got to think, beyond a little bit. If we're going to go down the casting route, you've got to think a little bit about the future. I think I was really proud of that one as well, Mae Whitman.
No, that's perfect. That is as close to perfect casting as you're going to get without going the way. That's great. No, I love Mae Whitman. I think she's extremely talented. I didn't really think of her as being particularly versatile until Good Girls.
Yeah, she's great in that show.
But that character is so different. She often does play. She often does get play. Like her character in Arrested Development was all sweet and innocent and religious and so that she's been cast like that quite a bit. So I was very surprised when Good Girls opened, and it took me a minute to even realize it was her. She's transformed so much in Good Girls. So yeah, 100% she's capable of doing that. Good choice.
Yeah, I think she'd be feisty. I think she'd be brilliant. My final choice is another one that I'm really, really proud of. And I really... There's a specific clip, which is one of the reasons for this, that people might not have seen, and I think this actress gets stereotyped quite a bit as well. But for Jasper, Kate McKinnon. So obviously SNL, Ghostbusters,
that is an interesting choice.
I think I would love to see her again, like Rebel Wilson, pushed in a more sincere role. But there's comedy elements to Jasper. I think there is a pairing. It's quite interesting. I think she could be quite imposing. And the thing that I really couldn't get out of my mind was the clip of her as Hillary Clinton singing Hallelujah after Donald Trump won the election. Look at the pathos and the heart and the performance that she's giving. It is a incredible performance. I think she's capable and should be given the opportunity to be pushed a little bit, and I think some great stuff could come out of that. So I'm casting her in my fictional movie, Dan.
I'm all for bold, interesting choices, and that is that. I mean, it's not a conventional choice at all. She would never have occurred to me, but I do think she's very talented, and I don't doubt she's capable of it with the right direction. So 100%, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, to clarify, Stephen Gatton Matarazzo.
I love that you're putting yourself through recapping these when you can't pronounce half the names. Carry on.
Garnet, Garnet, Lashana Lynch,
Sure.
Pearl, Constance Wu, Amethyst, Rebel Wilson, Lapis, Saoirse Ronan, Jasper, Kate McKinnon, Greg, Jack Black, Peridot, Mae Whitman. That's my cast, Dan.
On board.
There we go. So, you may have noticed, except you probably haven't noticed, because you didn't do the research that I've done. You may have noticed that there's a common thread between those actors, Dan, in that they can all sing. That is important, because I'm making this live-action movie
a musical. Very good. And you know what? I had a feeling you might do that, because I got the songs in contextually, because I didn't go full musical, because I was worried about, it's already so much to take. There's aliens, and everyone's fighting, and there's, there's people with gems in their bellies and stuff. I was like, they can't start singing as well. I was just like, I can't make that work, but I am now... I had a feeling you might do it, but I'm so excited to hear how you're going to make that function.
Yeah. There's a few reasons. Bizarrely, one of my reasons at first was like there was an exposition element, like that shit's easier in song.
Sure.
And I was like, so that's helpful. And then I haven't really gone down that route, but then there's holes you can probably pick, and that will require that. So by the end of this, there may be more of that. A big reason was, I think the songs are incredibly important to the show, and I think they're hard to get in naturally. Like, I can't remember how many you had. You had was it just We Are the Crystal Gems and a bit of Giant Woman?
We had We Are the Crystal Gems, Giant Woman, Let Me Drive My Van Into Your Heart, and
that was it.
But there was one other one, wasn't there? I think I snuck 4 in. I think. I'd have to go back.
So they're hard to get in, although I'm doing something controversial with it, which we'll get to. So songs can be hard to fit in naturally, but I think music's a big part of Steven Universe.
Yeah, and once you break that seal, not to interrupt, sorry, but once you break that seal, you've broke that seal. Once the audience have gotten over the shock of the cast breaking out into song, they go, "Oh, it's a musical," and then you get to do it the whole movie without anyone questioning it. That's step one, isn't it? Is finding the right moment to first do it. And if you can do that, if you can nail moment 1 of song and like bring the audience into it, then you're free to do what the fuck you like. I genuinely believe that. I think you can make it work as long as you can find a smooth way to transition into it the first time you do it, the audience will go with you on the subsequent transitions.
Yeah, well, it'll be promoted as a musical, and that for me is a big thing as well. It's already scary. If they actually announced this, it would be terrifying and daunting, and people would worry. If you go, it's a completely live-action cast, it's a musical, and this is the controversial bit, it's all original music as well.
That was going to be my next question. Are you? Yeah, okay. You're going
with the exception of We Are the Crystal Gems, it's new original music.
Who's writing the music?
Well, I don't know, because I don't know. It depends how involved Rebecca Sugar is. It depends. Is this after the show's finished? Is this? Do you know what I mean? Obviously, well, again, as I keep saying, in an ideal world, this wouldn't happen. But in a world where it is happening, you'd ideally want Rebecca Sugar. But I've not put a lot of thought into who. I mean, I guess thingamajig guy wrote Hamilton. If you're doing that,
oh, you're bringing Lin-Manuel in. Lin-Manuel. No, Lin-Manuel would be really a really smart move. Actually, he is.
Well, even though I don't particularly like the film, what I'm kind of going for is Steven Universe meets Guardians of the Galaxy meets The Greatest Showman. And again, to make this a bit different, there's an element of me thinking like an executive producer, as we've said before, and I think that combination could be a real hit. What I know,
no one's done a superhero style movie with it as a musical yet. That's not
So it's got a hook for people, for regular people that aren't fans of the show, but also for fans of the show. You're going, look, this is complete. This is its own beast. This is completely different. You're separating it a bit more, I think, by making it a musical with original music. And what I like, and you can play around with this, and again, it's this level of detail I've not really thought about. Some songs can be very, this happens, but in the main, one of the reasons that, and again, I think as a film, there's got some flaws, let alone the fact I'm not really sure it should exist. But because of the character it's based on. But The Greatest Showman, one of the things that's so fucking clever about that film, and especially the music, because whether you like the film or not, you cannot deny that it's an incredible soundtrack. And here's one of the reasons it's so effective and so popular, in my opinion. When you have This Is Me, even to some extent From Now On, but not as much, This Is Me and Rewrite the Stars, when you see those scenes in the movie, the characters are singing about the circumstances, singing about what's happening, and singing about themselves, categorically. But, as well as that, the songs are cleverly written because when you hear them in isolation, it can be a pop song about you. I don't necessarily, in my head at least, and it would be something that would be ironed out, this isn't, and then the gems landed and they started fighting the crystal gems. This is more, I feel this way and it affects me this way. It's triumphant. It's let it go. It's, if you think about all those big music songs of recent times, not so much, you know, The Lion King, but the ones of recent time, Let It Go, This Is Me, which are probably, I'd argue, the two biggest musical songs from film musicals of the last 5 years or whatever.
Chris, of course, is famously an expert on musicals.
Yeah, exactly. But that's kind of my point. I'm talking about the songs that have gone into popular culture enough for me to know them.
Absolutely. No, I was just it was just me poking fun.
So with that in mind, I kind of, that's the vibe I'm going for. The songs in isolation would still work as catchy songs. So that's where we're at, Dan. Guardians of the Galaxy meets Steven Universe meets The Greatest Showman. You excited?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about it a lot on here in our other podcast. Anything unique, I'm in. Like, give me something I've never seen before. My only question, and it's the question I think fans would be asking, is could you not at least have managed to fit one or two of the songs from the show in and do a mix? Was that a consideration at all? Did you ever think about using, you know, one or two of the songs from the show and then mixing them in with the original ones?
Well, you've got We Are the Crystal Gems, yes. And you've got, I think it's about generating excitement for what this is. There's some nods, so yeah, I'd almost want people to go in thinking that.
So do you, like recently as well, we had the Aladdin movie, and that was a musical, and there was a new song added, which I quite liked. I liked that movie actually a lot, but there was a song added, and it was kind of controversial. They were adding a song. People get very attached to the music from the things they love. Obviously, Aladdin has a much bigger audience than Steven Universe. So I suppose it's not as big an issue to upset the fans because there are not as many of them. But was that a concern that you might get some sort of not anger but like some backlash for not using the source material that way?
And I'm sure there will be backlash, and I'm sure there'll be actual backlash, even though this is a fictional scenario. And again, I'm just trying to mix it up a bit.
I'm excited by what you're doing as a film, but I like even I'm sort of going like, oh, would it be a shame to do a Steven Universe musical and not get a chance for me to hear Stronger Than You or
part
some
of
of the other big ones?
Part of me, one of the most fascinating pieces of feedback I've heard about The Lion King is that I was chatting to someone and they were like, "Yeah, I really liked it. Hated that they used James Earl Jones." And James Earl Jones? Yeah, that's right, isn't it? And I was like, "What? Why?" He's brilliant. He's Mufasa. No one else could be Mufasa. And he was like, I know, but that's sort of the problem. I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, there's a scene with Mufasa and Simba, and they're chatting. And because they've used exactly the same dialogue, half of that scene seems right. And you go, yep, cool, James Earl Jones. Whenever you hear Simba talk, even though Donald Glover is doing a great job, because it's exactly the same words and half of it is right and half of it is wrong, it sounds out of place. He was like, I didn't experience it when it was other people saying those words, but I was sort of, if you hear Giant Woman, if you hear For Just One Day, Let's Only Think About Love, are you going to be going, this sounds weird coming out of Gatton's mouth and not Zach Callison? If you stick to those songs, does it take the fans out of it because they're immediately comparing to the others? Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. But
I thought I had.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Yeah. It'd be interesting to see in practice, but obviously that'd be because I love that we've gone a musical. You have no musical skills whatsoever, Chris. I'm like, who's writing the music? You're like, I haven't figured that out. We're just gonna have new music.
Again, I've got this holes, Dan. I haven't had 2 years to put this together.
So far so good. Though. Like, I am definitely interested in seeing this movie. This movie sounds fascinating for a number of reasons. So yeah.
So let's. Oh man, I've not even got to like what happens, and you've picked holes. So I'm fucked.
I've not picked holes. I've simply done what you.
No.
I know. I've done what you did last week, which is
You have
present the counterpoint when you have a thing. I have no criticism.
You've shouted on me for not thinking about who's going to write the music. I don't care.
No, I was pointing out the irony of the person who has no music is going to be like, we're going to have new songs. That's a funny thing to me. Like if you were like if you had like, you know, if you could play the piano or something, I'd be like, oh, Chris can write this song. No, he's going, we're going to have brand new music. Who's writing it? Haven't thought that through. Don't care.
Oh, mate,
I'll get Elton John in. Who gives a shit?
I've got ideas and themes for the songs, so strap in for some of those.
That was going to be my next question, actually, was have you got points in your story that you're going to go through in a moment with like where you're going to go and this is where a song will be and it'll be about this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. Cool.
Yeah. Right, so one of the things you thought about the most was your opening. I'll be honest, it's one of the things I've thought about the least.
Sure.
So it opens, it potentially, or there's a place for it later.
Sorry to interrupt. Sorry, I don't mean it, but I just got to ask the question before we start. Is it? How did you stick with Stephen's perspective, or have you gone the other way?
I thought I was going to go the other way, but looking at what I've got, it's Stephen's perspective. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Cool. Just curious.
Yeah. Looking at what I've got. It is. At one point, I thought about just breaking that a little bit, but no, fundamentally. Then when I actually looked at it, I was like, "Oh no, this is all from Stephen's perspective, pretty much."
Yeah, I think it's because the show does that, and I think it's a language that you don't realize you're taking in, but you're taking in. Does that make sense? Like it's a storytelling approach that is so integral to the Stephen as a show that you're like that. I think even without realizing it, you would design your story that way. I think that's just I think that's just naturally what would happen. So yeah, no, it's not surprising to me that you ended up doing that by accident. To be honest.
Yeah. So again, I've not really put much right. So opens with a big, massive fight in Beach City with We Are the Crystal Gems, and potentially they're fighting Big Bird from Giant Woman, who's terrorizing the town.
Sure.
So I've not necessarily. When you were like, it all depends how you first launch into song, I was like, I've literally not thought of that.
Sure.
So I'll tell you some alternative ideas I had right at the very end, because I did have a different opening in mind. At one point, I'd cast Rose, but I haven't now.
Oh wow. We'll definitely come to that. Crack on. We'll come back. We'll circle round to that.
But
later.
at the minute. And again, it was a bit of a scramble on certain things today, where I was like, I need to edit this, and I didn't. I ended up kind of, basically, it's not as we said, it's not as prepped as we'd want. So there may be stuff. It's We Are the Crystal Gems, although it might become a different song, and We Are the Crystal Gems might come in later. Performed by Pearl, Garnet, Amethyst, and Stephen. Mm-hmm. It's a big battle around Beach City. There's a few key things I want. I want to get across in this battle what the characters are like by their actions, the way they're fighting, their interactions with each other. I think it's a real opportunity to do show, don't tell. Mm-hmm. And I think you can really show who these characters are. I want to do what we didn't get from Harry Potter. As regular listeners may know, my biggest complaint about the Harry Potter movies is they turned the wands into guns. And instead of these really interesting battles where you have loads of fight scenes where Dumbledore's like turning shit into fire, and then He Who Must Not Be Named is turning shit into snow. Like, rather than that, they were shooting wand-shaped guns at each other, and that annoyed me. I don't want that in this. I want the fighting to be really visual, and like it is in the show, for them to be using their weapons, etc.
Mm-hmm.
A few other things I want some town people about, and I want scenes of potentially Big Bird. I kind of just thought today about like, well, who would these gem creatures be? Where I just kind of put gem creature. It's attacking, and you've got like the people who run the pizza place rolling their eyes and pulling down the shutters.
The people who run the pizza place. You mean the pizzas?
Yeah, I can't remember the names. I want at one point, and
We'll call them the pizzas.
You'd need another gem for this. This was before I decided it was Big Bird. But at one point, I want one of the monsters to appear in front of Lars, and Lars to visibly spot the gem and go, are you one of the good ones or the bad ones? And then the gem attacks him, and he's like, bad one, and he's throwing donuts at it or some shit like that. Because I think I love the idea that potentially that you get it. Are you one of the good ones or bad ones? The audience is sat there going, right, some of these gems are bad, some of them are good. We're seeing them fight. Okay, cool. Like, it gets that across. You're a fan, Dan. You're watching this. You're like, oh, this is surprising. This is quite action packed. Mm-hmm. Oh, is it doing too much at once? And then Steven starts yelling, "Fuse, fuse," and we get Opal within the first song.
Wow.
Now, if you have to cast Opal, because by the logic of Garnet's played by someone, you'd presumably have to cast any other fusion that you see. Mm-hmm. I haven't put too much thought into this at all, but I was thinking maybe Zoe Saldana, so Gamora in the MCU, whatever her character was called from Avatar. I thought she'd be pretty good. Mm-hmm. I'll address it now. As we kind of touched upon briefly in Dan's episode, part of the story I want to tell involves telling a bit of the story of fusion. That's a real struggle to make work when you're introducing so many concepts. So my notion for making it work is that throughout the movie, from the off, we see fusion. And when we see it, it's fucking joyous. Opal is amazing. It's funny. Steven's excited. Opal's kicking ass. She's doing amazing things. And Opal like wins them the battle. Like, it's fucking awesome. And it's just, these are magical creatures, and one of the things they can do is fuse. The audience will see Pearl and Amethyst come together. They'll see Opal. They should be right. Okay, we get that. I think if you play it like that, it helps with what I want to do later. But also, it's the Power Rangers calling the Megazords. It's if you don't go into the details and the nuances, which might upset some fans, I fully admit that. Then you potentially, you need to go into as much detail as you give yourselves to go into. It will probably piss people off, but the notion in this scene is what I'm trying to do here is go, oh, fusion's a power that they have where they can fuse and fight. And like I say, the key thing is it's fucking awesome. There's a lot of points in this where I'm like, yep. At another point, you see Steven, see Greg, and they say hello. There's some comedy there. I don't know what. Steven is yelling, yeah. Right, at one point, the corrupted, so Big Bird is there, and Steven, like, makes some silly attempt to talk to it, and it goes really wrong. He's like, hey, just calm down. And, like, it attacks him or whatever. It's played for comedy, but there is, throughout the fight, the notion that Steven isn't really a fighter. He's quite scared. He doesn't know really what he's doing. Fumbly Steven, that we all love and all know and love, is very much Steven in this. And maybe he makes a mistake. He messes up somehow and they win, but they nearly couldn't have won as a result of Steven. We are the Crystal Gems. Big ass battle. It's all awesome. That's how the movie opens, Dan.
So there's a lot to take in there. My big question, and this is again more of a devil's advocate thing, because I think because I can't judge you on execution here, because we're not getting to see the execution. Obviously, you're just giving us the broad ideas. So this isn't a criticism, but. Did you wonder that might be quite challenging to achieve in 2 to 3 minutes? Because you've just so you've described the gems coming down, introducing the gems, getting a moment where we get to know each of them in the battle while they're singing the song. We've got a moment where we meet Lars and he throws donuts at the thing. We get a moment where Steven meets Greg. Then we get the Opal fusion and a kick-ass battle, and it all happens while the song is on. The song is 3 minutes long. Is the song longer, or do you really think you can cram all that into such a short space?
Sure, we could extend the song.
Right.
Like something like something like Guardians, whilst we meet Star-Lord prior, most of the Guardians are introduced in that outside scene where the police are chasing them and stuff, and then shortly after as well.
I think I'm pretty sure that sequence is like 10-15 minutes long though.
Yeah, possibly. And you might need to extend this. Again, it's one of those without like sounding defensive, it's just one of those details that I haven't got to.
Right. That was my question. Had that occurred to you? Had you thought that? Have you had to think about like the actual logistics of fitting in all of that in what would normally be a short space?
No, not particularly, because for me, what you need to set up is there's a group of people fighting another group of fighting monsters that are similar to them, and Steven's a little bit useless, and some of them are, that's the main thing to set up for me.
I think it's really good. It reminds me, but this is where it might come into problems there. It reminds me of the opening to Guardians 2.
Yeah,
but the slight problem with that is what Guardians 2, you would argue, slightly gets away with it because they don't actually. You already know they're banking on most of the audience already knowing the characters. It kind of works as a recap in a world where you don't of who they all are and what they're like, because you can see each of them doing it, as they fight this random monster, and that's kind of what you're. That's really how this feels reminiscent. So yeah, I like it, but I would worry about new viewers trying to.
It would take incredibly careful planning of what they were doing, what represented each character, it is all about the execution of it, and so that makes it, like you say, a really difficult one to discuss, because I haven't worked out that execution. But that's the notion.
And then the only other question I have is out of curiosity: had you given any thought to like Steven's? Because obviously the story originally in the show is Steven coming into his powers and growing into being a crystal gem. Did you give any thought to like what his skill level is at this stage in your story? He's a little bit further on than He's not got any of his weaponry yet. He's still bad, but I'd say he's a little bit further along than the very beginning of the show, and certainly a little bit more advanced than he is in yours. But he's no fighter. None of his powers have come to fruition yet. He's quite junior in that sense. And you'd obviously establish that within this scene.
Yeah, by him being a bit useless and by being a bit worried, and a big thing is his insistence to try and do it another way, to try and have that calm chat. But that's a theme of the show and a theme that's explored throughout this. Sure. So yeah, cool. Big ass battle. There we go. So then there'd be a scene. Steven visits Greg. Feels he isn't good enough. Feels he isn't, he's sort of saying, and we kind of within this scene, set up that his mum's not around anymore. And maybe set up that, he's got her gem, because he kind of talks about how he should be showing signs of powers now, but he can't do anything. Maybe Greg says something wonderful about Rose, something about him, but yeah, they have a conversation. Then we get a Pearl and Steven training montage / song, which is a song called You Gotta Be. At the moment, that's what it's called. And it's like, you gotta be this, you gotta be whatever. It's a song about what Pearl thinks Steven has to be. I like the idea. It's mainly Pearl. This is kind of Constant Wu's moment of this film at the moment, although there's space to put others in. But I really liked, it's partly because it's something you harp on about quite a lot. I like that notion of the pressure that's on Steven, and the pressure to feel like he. I didn't mean that as a negative.
I know, but it's just it's something you harp on about all the time. Oh god, he's forever fucking talking about this. Jesus,
you talk about it a lot.
I do. It's a big part of the show.
But it's a great point, and I say, harp is just a term I use with affection. The notion of the pressures on Steven, and this is just a kid, and all these things that he has to be. So that's done in that song. At some point, don't know if it's in the song, don't know if it's in the scene around the scene. At some point, Stephen looks over, and Amethyst, who's potentially in the background mocking, Stephen looks over at a girl who we don't clearly see, but a young girl sat reading on the beach. And Amethyst says, "Why don't you just go talk to her?" And he goes, "Oh no, I can't." And then we move on. So we're basically, Connie is around, but he has not had the guts to talk to her.
Sure.
So also, and this is, I have to keep reminding myself, this is kind of essentially how it was done in the show, but this would probably need some work. Part of their training is a big old chest of gem shit, Dan. Maybe there's some fun references to the show. Maybe there's some knowing nods for fans, a few Easter eggs there. Also included is a mirror.
Shocking.
Yeah. I know, right? That's something that would potentially need work. But then again, like you said last week, that's kind of how it happens in the show.
Well, no, in the show she pulls it out of her head. It's stored in her head in the show.
Yeah, I thought about that, and it could definitely be that. I can't remember why I didn't land on that.
Because I had a chest, but then I removed it. If you remember rightly, I didn't end up using the chest. That was one of my nixed ideas before I had him find it at the Sea Spire.
Yeah, I don't. Another idea. This is one of those things that isn't finalized. Obviously, fucking none of this is finalized. It's fictional. But I thought about Big Bird, the battle at Big Bird, ending up at their home. What's the term for it? The temple. At the temple and destroying something, and the mirror being found in the wreckage. And so maybe they're doing the training montage in the wreckage, and then Stephen finds it. Maybe Pearl pulls it out. I don't know, but he gets the mirror here, basically. So, Stephen and the mirror then walk around town, basically, and we have a song about. We see them beginning to interact, and we have all of that play out similarly to how it is in the show. And Stephen sings a song about what he sees when he looks at his reflection, how he feels he isn't good enough, how he feels his approach isn't right, and it's basically a song about Stephen's insecurities and what he sees when he looks in the mirror, basically.
That's great.
That at the very end of that song, the mirror cracks, and then Lapis is released. So Lapis and Stephen have a bit of a confrontation scene where she talks to him about the crystal gems. Actually, maybe that comes on later. They get on a bit better first. There's some Lapis Stephen stuff, basically, that I've not fleshed out. And basically, Lapis essentially says, I'll show you who the crystal gems really are. And at this point, I don't know if because they kind of, I think either it has to be a lot closer than it is in the show, or they have to go to the warp pad, but they end up in the prime kindergarten, essentially. So she kind of explains that the gems are, an alien race that take over planets. She shows him the kindergarten. She explains what they are, and she explains that the crystal gems were fighting the gems. And Stephen's kind of saying, "Oh yeah, but they're the good guys." And Lapis says, "If they're the good guys," she explains at this point. And I don't know if maybe there's a little gem monster there or something for this. I don't know. But this is the scene where she's clarified what the corrupted gems are, who these gem monsters they're fighting are. And when Stephen kind of says they're the good guys, she says, "Have you ever wondered why all the other gems on this earth are corrupted, but the crystal gems are okay? Or we're fine," or something like that. I really like the notion that if you don't know the story, she just plants that seed of, did the crystal gems do something? Why? If Earth is full of these corrupted gems, why are they okay? Like, I know fans.
Sorry to interrupt, but have you established that they're aliens yet? Because we've jumped to like oh, they're on this planet. We're very much talking about them as if we. So have we established that they're aliens at this point, essentially?
Yeah, she covers that in the chat. Aliens who came down, and then.
Gotcha.
She says it better than that, but
sure. Yeah. She comes out the mirror. He's like, "Hi, who are you?" She's like, "I'm Lapis." He's like, "Cool." She's like, "Yeah, we were aliens that came down." And he's like, "Cool," and then we just move on. I think that's perfect. It's a chef's kiss. Mwah. It's great dialogue.
I mean, you said you wouldn't.
I was yes-anding your bit. Don't be.
Huh? I'm joking. But it is kind of the gems are an alien race that harvest planets to build more of their own kind. The crystal gems is a rebellion that formed to fight them and stop that from happening. It's something like that. So yeah, it is covered here, but I don't want to give any more than you need to give. Do you know what I mean? I've not at least here gone into how they were corrupted. She's essentially covering aliens, and I think he in the Greg scene, to avoid it being too much at once, has already talked about, Rose isn't there. And again, I don't think you need to say. What's nice is I don't think you necessarily, and I'd need to really work on this more to firmly decide on it, but I don't know if you need to say Rose turned into me if they've got the gem, but then later on people think he's Rose. That's not a huge part of it. Anyway. It's not that well thought out. So Lapis and Stephen are in prime kindergarten, and I love. So, what do you think of that notion? Like, ever wonder why all the other gems are corrupted?
Oh, it's a great angle. I mean, it's because it's essentially what we were I was getting at with mine, but a different version of it, where like. So that you've gone the same route, which is like Lapis is the one who drops that information on Steven. Like from a narrative perspective in a movie, it's a really good way to push the story forward. That he gets the information from an external source. Lapis makes the most sense by a million miles. And I really like her angle on it, which is to she's not reacting like Lapis of the show or even the pitch I gave. She's actually being a little bit smarter about it. She's trying to convince Steven. She's trying to win Steven over to her side, essentially, because that's a convincing argument. And in the show, and kind of even in my version, like which was quite close to the show, she was reactive, but she wasn't. Manipulative is the wrong word, but she wasn't trying to convince anyone of anything. She was just like, she already decided, and it really didn't matter what anyone else thought. She wasn't trying to change anyone's mind. She wanted to continue to spend time with Steven. She invited him to come with her, but when he turns that down, like it's not like she then goes, but this and that. Like she just goes fine and leaves. So it's an interesting approach to have her trying to sort of almost corrupt Steven in a weird way. Like, I don't know. I wonder how an audience would react to her. Would they find that suspicious and immediately assume she's the villain? Or would they go the other way and start being very suspicious of the gems? I'm not sure which way an audience would take it, but I'd be fascinated to see how it would be executed. It'd be very interesting.
Yeah, and you've got a few options there in terms of the execution. I think I'd lean more to would they be suspicious of the crystal gems? Mm-hmm. But then equally they are the heroes and you want them to be on side. I think maybe the ideal is that she essentially comes across as someone with that. She's been through hell, and how I want her angle.
Does she tell that story? Because you mentioned that she tells them about like the aliens, and the war, essentially. But
yeah, she kind of she basically she does paint herself as, I don't know how much we go into. I got trapped in a mirror. I haven't thought about that, but the notion would be that she presents herself as the person that does not want to be involved in any of this because she never wanted to be involved in a war anyway. She's been fucked over by the war and she wants to get the hell out. And it's a bit of a cheat because it's done in the montage where Stephen really opens himself up to the mirror and therefore Lapis. But essentially it's and I care about you and you also should have no part in this. And her whole thing is, I don't want to fight, and you know what? I don't think you should either, Stephen. And I did toy, actually. That's another mirror thing that I didn't talk about. I did toy with Stephen's always had the mirror, and Stephen's always talked to it. and then
that's
a cheat.
That's a great idea. Why didn't you do that?
It's
what was
a
the
cheat
thinking
because,
against it?
Because it felt like a bit of a cheat because essentially my reasoning was then you've got a relationship between Stephen and Lapis, but I didn't know if it was cheating because a lot of it's happened off screen.
Well, the only thing I think you could do that's against that. Well, there's two problems with that, I suppose, if you were going to try and argue why you wouldn't use that idea. Because I do think it's really cool because you've got a built-in existing relationship. You don't have to spend too much time setting it up, any time saving you can do here, the better. Because there's a lot of mythology, there's a lot of information to get across, and you've actually condensed it down into the first act, it seems, here, which means you've got... But because I got to all this stuff through my second act, you seem to be getting all this in...
But I feel like you put more. I've done it quicker, but I feel like I've been a bit more selective with the exposition. But I don't know. Maybe I haven't. I don't know.
No, you're at the exact same exposition point in terms of.
But I've not gone into diamonds or anything. I've basically
nor had
gone
I at this point. Not when Lapis first comes out the thing.
Right. Yeah.
You've given the exact same. The only thing I gave more than you at this point was the diamond arms shooting the beam and corrupting the. But you've kept that back because you're going on the angle of why did the crystal gem survive and the rest didn't. So you obviously would have to. But otherwise, information wise, you've got exactly the same thing as me. You've set up maybe briefer, but you've set up that she's a prisoner of war, or she was a prisoner of war trapped in her or something. But like kind of briefly, you've kind of hinted at the corrupted gems and what they are. It's as much as my Stephen knew at that point in the story. Although you're still in your first act, so you've not a criticism because again you can get a lot of exposition in a very short space of time, especially if you're using songs. It's just interesting that you've gone there so early.
And Lapis could have a song that explains it, but I've given her a song at another point, which I think is potentially more interesting. I think one of the biggest things we've learned from doing this exercise, and it's funny because I think it's a problem that we've both hit when doing it, not one that we would have predicted, is that working out, because the discussion here is exactly the same as it was in yours. Like, you had two scenes close together that were very expositional. I've put an awful lot of exposition in one act, and it's how you do that exposition and how you get that across. And I was trying to go for the whole last thing of, are you one of the good ones or the bad ones? I was trying to narrow it down, but there's just so much that's so relevant to the characters and what's happening. It's really hard to narrow down to the bare bones, because as you said, that's me trying to narrow it down, and then you're like, yeah, but for that to work, you need to really set up that she's a prisoner of war, and it's like, yeah, fuck, well, I guess chuck that in there as well. Yeah. I don't think either of us would have necessarily predicted that, but I think the biggest stumbling block in this exercise is the exposition required.
Well, I mean, it was the primary focus for me was about how to get the information across. I definitely expected it. I don't think I achieved it perfectly at all. I had as many issues, but it was like one of my first things to sit down and do was like work out what information we were going to give and at what point he was going to get it, and having to find a way to sprinkle it across, as large a section of the movie so not to overwhelm an audience. So it was definitely a concern for me when I was going in, but it's more of a problem maybe than you might assume when you lay it out. But yeah, it's a huge issue. It's like there's just the world was set up over such a long space of time, very slowly with bits of information, that anything to try and get everyone caught up to even tell a decent story, it's just got to be a dump, and it's about how you execute it, which is exactly what you were saying. It's going to all come down to the execution.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like that's why it can't really be judged how well you're doing it. You've certainly done it earlier in the film in terms of your structure. It looks like, it sounds to me like you're about to get to the end of essentially Act 1. If we're going by the sort of if we're going by Joey Campbell's hero's journey, and if we're doing the Dan Harmons Story Circle, you're not at the meeting. You're about to hit. You're crossing the threshold at this point, essentially. In terms of the
because I've had 3 songs, so it's at least 24 minutes in, although I suppose in a movie.
That's first act, yeah. That's that's very much first act. So the mirror thing, I suppose the two arguments against it, one is like, the one for it is that it gives you a big jump on exposition because you don't have to do as much work setting up Lapis and Steven's relationship. The downsides, the big one that occurred to me just then was if you make it so he's had a lasting relationship with Lapis, you've got this issue of one of the reasons that she's not happy with the crystal gems beside the war is that they've had her this whole time and not freed her. She's been trapped. She's been a prisoner. And you can't make Stephen her captor because then it really doesn't make sense. Stephen cannot have been her captor for more than a minute. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just the way it has to go, you know? So, yeah. It's problematic immediately, I suppose, even though it's a really nice shortcut and potentially a nice idea to have had them have a sort of bonded for so long ahead of it. I can maybe see why that might not actually be the best idea, despite the fact that on the surface you go, oh, that is interesting, but I suppose in practice,
I think that's I don't know whether I consciously thought of it that way, but I think that played a part in me dismissing it.
For sure.
So, but not that, you know, he has a random mirror for a song is much better. So at this point,
I think the mirror song's brilliant. By the way, I genuinely like that's a great idea.
Yeah,
to use use the iconography of a mirror and what a mirror can represent in terms of reflecting yourself, and to literally use the mirror that is Lapis to tell us about Stephen's character. So you're essentially doing character work and story, you know, and pushing the story forward in the same, 4 minutes. That's a brilliant shortcut. Like, don't get me wrong, like that's a genius idea. Like, really does help. Yeah, and maybe that's one of several ideas like that sprinkled throughout this first act will make it feel, maybe will help it from, or will stop it from feeling like it's a big giant info dump. Because that would be my concern with getting all that information out in one act. But I don't know, like enough shortcuts like that. Great ideas where you can do two things at once, then I can't see why it wouldn't work.
And maybe if worked up properly, some of that information is out a bit later. Who knows? And isn't necessarily all here. But at this point, so Lapis is kind of, like I say, really encouraging Stephen to stop it, like to not be involved in this. And Stephen's kind of saying, well, I have to, I feel I need to. And she's like, no, you shouldn't be hanging out with them. You should have a friend your own age, preferably one that's not an alien or a war criminal. Like some witty dialogue about that or something. Then the gems arrive, and Lapis is clearly just a little bit disgusted and a little bit put off by Garnet. She's thrown by Garnet. She's not overtly rude. She's not, but she's double taking and she's uncertain. And you definitely get the feeling that there's a reason to be unsure of Garnet, right? Specifically.
That might be controversial as a choice, but yeah, I'm very intrigued as to where you're going with that.
I'm not, but it's not. She's not anti-Garnet. Garnet's alien to her. Garnet's an oddity to her, because she's not familiar with fusion, for those that will be in the know. So she's not overtly cruel or anything like that to Garnet, but she's definitely wary.
What do you mean she's not familiar with fusion?
Well, she's a gem. She's got the typical. She's not as bad as Jasper, as we shall find out, but she's got that gem. Fusion is a cheap trick. Fusion isn't something that should happen. Point of view, but she's not as overt with it. She doesn't say that directly to Garnet's face, but she's clearly a bit wary of.
For a minute, I thought you were suggesting that she literally didn't know fusion existed. So I just wanted to clarify.
No. She knows. But how the gems. You know how to the gems.
I know what you're referring to now, but the way you phrased it was she wouldn't know. Like the way you phrased it made it sound like you were suggesting she just might not know what fusion is. So I was just okay. Fine. Yeah. Cool. Just for clarification.
So she's wary and a bit, and then
she's not quite over the social stigma that was baked into her from Homeworld, basically.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Actually, I don't really know here. I didn't have a chance to work out when the. Yeah, we'll go with that. The gems arrive. All right. And then.
Sorry, I just love because obviously you've had less time than me, and it's really it's like it's just so funny because you've obviously like the stuff that I had the just through the luck the time to work out. I love the way you're approaching it, which is just being honest and just like, I don't fucking know. I haven't. What do you want from me?
I'm just trying to work out who because I want to see, because I think it's especially because I think in my head. Lapis. So in my head, Lapis and Steven are there.
Mm-hmm.
The gems appear, and they're like, "Right, he needs to come with us." And she's like, "No, he should stay with me." And they're getting ready to fight, and then there's a noise, and we have the arrival of Jasper and Peridot.
Right.
But that means we don't have the gems fighting Lapis, which I think could be awesome visually and shows you a bit of that sternness to Lapis that we don't necessarily potentially see otherwise. But anyway, so I might need to work on that bit, but fuck it. For the purpose of this, they're about to fight, and then we get a noise, and then we get Jasper and Peridot.
I mean, wow, that is. Right, if we could stop for a second here. Are you near a break point, or are you happy to take a minute to talk about what's how this is all unfolding as it goes?
There's a more obvious.
If you've got a more obvious jumping off point in a few minutes, we'll just do that. But like,
there's a more obvious jumping off point, but you're only going to get more. Yeah. So Jasper and Peridot arrive. Lapis is terrified. She's fucking petrified. She goes and hides with Steven. The other crystal gems hide. We have a bit of Jasper Peridot stuff where they come out. And we see Jasper do, I don't know, something. He disrupts a piece of equipment, something like that. He reveals a corrupted gem, who she immediately poofs with real... just not bothered, gets glee from it, is just destroying this gem, poofing it, and is just like, like she gets real enjoyment from that. Mm-hmm. And it directly contrasts with when we eventually defeat Big Bird in the beginning battle. I'm nicking yours. The crystal gems are very gentle with that poofing.
Sure.
They're very apologetic for it. Jasper, completely different.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, Big's Jasper. Is poofed. And then basically something happens and the crystal gems are
I can't not laugh every time you do that, because what I just love is like the idea that you've like that you're writing it on. It almost whenever you do that, it sounds so prepared, and then you'll suddenly go, I don't know, whatever. And every time you do that, I don't mean to laugh, but it's so funny to go from you're reading out a document where you figured it out to a certain degree and you know what's going to happen, and you just suddenly go, I don't know, some shit happens here. And every time you do that, that's just the funniest thing to me. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, because I've tried to figure out the beats, not necessarily what connects them.
Yeah, no, which is fine, which is absolutely fine, 100%. It's just amusing to hear when you do it's almost like it's like a left-hand turn. It's like very quite jarring for you to be like, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then I don't know, this bit I'm just kind of whatever. Well, fuck it. Well, some stuff like every time it happens, it amuses me. I can't help it. So sorry, carry on.
So massive fight.
Sure.
Jasper Peridot, and Jasper releases some spotted better kindergarten monsters. Spotted and striped. So do you know the ones I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like tiger type things.
Mm-hmm. I think they are corrupt quartzes.
Oh, cool. I think so. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure. So big fight between the crystal gems and Jasper and Peridot.
Mm-hmm.
As the fight is happening, Lapis sings her song about not wanting to get involved and not wanting to fight, and her reasons for that. So there's this juxtaposition of Saoirse Ronan doing this beautiful song and watching, and I think it's I don't know the rhythm of the song. I don't think it's all out heavy. I don't think it's all out slow. But the fighting almost becomes dance. It almost becomes ballet to this juxtaposing song. And again, the fighting is really playing on strengths. We before the fight, Jasper is fucking atrocious to Garnet. What I've written is that Jasper is disgusted with Garnet and ashamed of Amethyst, because she thinks Amethyst should be, they're sisters. She should be fighting with her. She's fucking vile to Garnet. Big fight, awesome juxtaposition. Stephen joins the fight, even though Lapis is trying to tell him not to. I think maybe because, again, I kind of need Fusion to be seen this way. Maybe we get Alexandrite, which really is possibly going to blow your brain a bit too much and make people go, "Nah, I'm out. It's too much."
I think in a world where you've done Opal, I think the barrier was jumping to Opal that quickly. Again, like everything else that I've brought up here is maybe being a little bit too much information. Again, could be smoothed out in execution. So I am I want the listeners to understand that I'm not bringing it up as a criticism. So I think if you've successfully weaved Opal in at the beginning. Fuck it, you could absolutely get away with Alexandrite without question. Remember in the show they introduced Alexandrite for a gag.
Yeah, and again,
you're doing it in the midst of a big epic battle. Like, yeah, cool.
And I'm doing it to show Fusion as this superpower and to show Fusion as just this just this power that they have and just this joyous, amazing thing. So we've got some Alexandrite, potentially Gwendolyn Christie.
Oh, that's good casting
from Game of Thrones and stuff.
Can I have a little tangent sidebar about something here very quickly?
Yeah.
I know someone who knows Gwendolyn Christie, nice. Trained with her as an actor. And he was one of the first people she rang when she got nominated for the Emmy, which I think is just adorable.
Aww.
Like they're quite close. And I said he needs to tell her immediately that she needs to go and march right into Disney's offices right now, kick the doors in, and demand to be She-Hulk immediately.
Yeah.
Because that character is so perfect for her. Strong, confident. Yeah. So what? I'm green. I'm also a lawyer. What do you like? I'm me. Whatever. Yeah. Stick it. I'm giant, green, and muscly. What's that to you? I'm also intelligent and capable of winning a very big trial. Gwendolyn Christie is perfect for that role, and I'll be very upset if she doesn't get to do it. Anyway, I'll also tell them that you've pitched her for a Steven Universe movie.
Yeah, and there's probably I really didn't have much time to think about the actors for the fusions.
Sure.
But I do like that notion. I think she's got the presence again that could.
Yeah, she'd absolutely be for that. So sorry to interrupt again, but in terms of the fusions, because I didn't do any of the big fusions. Alexandrite is 5 stories tall. How is that just CG?
Yeah, she's
fully
pretty.
CG?
I didn't. She's pretty fucking big. I don't know.
So do you in that case then, if she's that big, is she a fully CG creation? In which case, do you need an actress as such?
Yeah, possibly not. But again, my logic is Garnet is an actress. The potentially Alexandrite, you don't need an actress. I think you need an actress for Opal. I don't know if you do for Alexandrite, but I like the idea of consistency, and I like the idea of. I'm trying to think, what's it like? John Lennon. Oh, I won't finish that sentence. Let me think of another example.
Chris,
I'm trying to think of it, but you know when you see a cameo in a movie and you're like, oh, it's that person, and it doesn't take you out. Peter Dinklage in Infinity War. You're like, oh fuck, it's Peter Dinklage. Doesn't take you necessarily out of the moment. You're just like, oh cool, and you kind of get the feeling that from the actor's point of view, it's like, look, just turn up for a day, don't worry, it'll be fun. This is what we're trying to do, this is what we're trying to achieve. So I like the idea of it being like that. Jasper spits that Alexandrite is a cheap trick, that fusion is a cheap trick. Again, she's an arsehole. And then Lapis is singing that song, and then by the end of it, the crystal gems have managed to essentially capture Peridot and Jasper. Do I know how? Do I fuck? I don't know. Lassos from Amethyst? I don't know. They've captured them. And Lapis, shaking her head at the violence, leaves, I think via the warp pad, which kind of has to be then how they get there, or it's closer, whatever.
There's a warp pad on the hand of the statue at the temple. So you could, as a suggestion, she could water blast herself up to that one and use it.
Yeah, and I like the notion that you then see her. You see her then walk out into the ocean by the beach, and then the Crystal Gems and Stephen take Jasper and Peridot back to the temple via the ship.
Do they poof them, or do they just capture them by like tying them up?
They just capture them.
Right.
They just capture them.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of is potentially, you could argue, the end of Act 1. I've not necessarily thought of
Whoa.
in
Sorry.
those
No.
terms.
What? That's at the end of Act 1?
Well, I've not thought of it in those terms, but it's a jumping off point for you to ask your questions. I've truly not gone Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, so I've got no real...
I was going to say, but in terms of like where
idea.
you would be in the normal story, that's mid Act 2 to the... Well, we're not at the end of Act 2 because we haven't really hit the low point yet, or we're probably... I'm guessing we're about to, but the crossing of the threshold happened, then you had like sort of like the chaos element, which is the fight. So I suppose next comes the lowest point if we're going back to the traditional story structure. But I have questions. I have a few. So first of all, I think very clever to... If you're going to do Jasper and Peridot, really restructure it so they show up earlier in the story from the show's perspective. Bring them in early enough to actually spend some time with them, because when I tried to make Jasper and Peridot happen in my version of it, I simply shuffled the final fight with Lapis to the end of Act 2 and made Act 3 fight Jasper and Peridot. The problem with that,
in earlier.
Yeah, so the problem I had was that you then just two random people show up and you fight them, and it's like, well, we were invested in the other villain. Like, who are these people, and why are they the big boss fight at the end of this? Very clever to bring Jasper in earlier, Jasper and Peridot, but I more Jasper, I think, because what you've essentially done is fixed the issue I was having, which is that you don't know Jasper, you're not invested in Jasper as either a villain or a hero in the version I originally had in my head before I adjusted it and took her out altogether. What you've done very cleverly is bring them in much earlier. It stops them from fighting Lapis, which from a structure perspective is probably good, because that fight can only ever end in a draw, because you need the movie to keep going. They can't beat Lapis there and then, because then you've not got a movie.
Yeah, and from a practical point of view, there's no water by the kindergarten.
Right, yeah, of course. So yeah, absolutely, yeah. So that, and also by doing it at the kindergarten, you've got a good excuse for why Jasper and Peridot showed up. They were coming in to check on the cluster or whatever. Like, logically, you know exactly why they're there. Well, the audience wouldn't necessarily know yet why they were there, but but fans of the show wouldn't be like, what? Like, that you could put that together if you already knew the show, which is nice. So I think there's a lot of really smart choices there made from a structural perspective that really do allow you narratively to get those characters into the story in a way I didn't. And then the big bonus is you actually get a lot of time to just make Jasper heinous in every possible way to the audience.
Yes, which is a big thing for what I'm trying to do. Yeah,
and I think it could. I think it would, because you've introduced fusion. But I think it might need slightly, as a suggestion, is a scene earlier on that maybe establishes that fusions aren't just we can merge together, but actually that it's about their relationship and it's about stability and about like that, because then the friendship stuff, because then her disgust at that would be even more like appalling, because she's not just judging the physical act of using that ability, she's judging them, their relationships, essentially, you know, and that's even more powerful. Other than that, that's a great idea. I think that's a perfect way to do it. Your audience automatically are going to hate Jasper. Very clever, 100% on board. The only slight criticism, and it's not a criticism, it's more of a I wonder what you're going to have to do with this next, because my only concern, if I wrote the story up to this point where you've got it now and I was up to there, I would be going, have I just watered down my villain by having them defeated at the end of the in the middle of the second act, essentially? Like, will anyone in the audience feel that Jasper is a threat now going forward because the gems just beat Jasper? So as a question, well, no, first of all, the compliment of I think there's so many brilliant ideas in there. Like, as a way to do it, you've figured out something I genuinely could not make work. So I all the credit to you. I think that's really clever. But the sort of query I have is, when you got to this point when you were sort of figuring out your story, did you wonder about sort of devaluing your own villain, or is there something? And did you have a solution in place? Do you turn Lapis into the villain and they have a different role? I'm not really sure where it's going now, which is exciting in itself. But like just from a perspective of like when you were putting it together, did that occur to you at all, or?
A little bit. For me, it's kind of because I think in my head, the image I have in my head is them lassoing Jasper. They demoralize Peridot. They potentially, and this plays into part what might happen next. Although arguably we're approaching on the bit that is truly was fleshed out a little bit, but yeah, it's probably the grey area potentially. I don't know, but I like the notion that they take the armor off Peridot. They dismantle Peridot. Jasper, they really tightly have to lasso, and for me, whenever you see a villain, that imagery of someone tied up like that is so grained in your mind as they escape that, and it is not a defeat or a win. It is a solution it is a temporary solution to an ongoing problem. That's kind of maybe a slight answer to that, but it's probably something that would need more thought. But yeah, I think maybe that, whether conscious or not, that's why in my head they lasso her. That's why they tie her up. She's not defeated. She's temporarily muted. Right.
So would you then? I suppose the trick, and I don't know if you've done this, but I suppose the next thing you do then is very much spend time with the gems, freaking out over Jasper's.
Yes. So
and establishing that she's still very much a threat to them.
Yes. So at one point, so let me kind of give the next little chunk and then discuss the kind of options. So the next chunk I've actually got is they have Jasper outside, and one of them always has to be with her. One of them always has to be talking to her, and we get two specific scenes, not necessarily in this order, but we get a Jasper Garnet scene and we get a Jasper Amethyst scene. We actually get a Jasper Amethyst song, which is essentially "This Is Who We Are." So it is Jasper saying to Amethyst, we were built for this purpose. It is ingrained in us that we do this, that we fight, that we take planets, that they're ours. This is who we are. This is our fucking DNA. This is our structure. What the hell are you doing rebelling? How are you even able to rebel? And I've gone very back and forth on how much it's a duet. At one point I had a scene where they were both in the kindergarten and didn't know. They were on it was massive, and they were on opposite sides. And potentially there's a way to work this back in. I don't know. But you had Jasper looking at the holes and celebrating them in the song, and then the other half of the song was Amethyst looking at them and lamenting them and resenting them. And you played with that juxtaposition. I haven't necessarily determined where I stand on it, but I am very determined that whatever the amethyst of it all, it is a song about Jasper saying, "This is the way you should be. This is the way I am." That's what they've done with Jasper. With Peridot, Dan, you'll be unsurprised to hear they flung her in the bathroom.
Brilliant. Yeah, and I kind of there was a part of me that was like, he's bathroom, right, in my head, and I just sort of went, yeah, maybe not, I don't know, we'll see. And I'm glad. Yeah.
So she's in the bathroom, and if there's, because this will I'll explain more when it ends, but this is you could do some really good stuff with. I love the idea. So the song I've got for Peridot is My Master Plan. And it's a song about her master plan and all the ways she's going to escape. and all of them are thwarted really easily. And they did similar, like a montage in the show of her in the bathroom, and the notion is like, I'll do this, and then I'll do this, and then I'll do this, and Steven just like gets out the shower and is like, no, you won't, like whatever. But it's basically a montage of that alongside scenes of the crystal gems, and this is a real opportunity to see the crystal gems with Steven. I think I suffer a little bit for the same thing, for the same criticism you threw at your own, which is how much time is Steven spending with the crystal gems themselves?
Yes.
You know, but so this is an opportunity for him to be with them, and so you have Peridot's song, you have Jasper's song, you have Jasper and Amethyst, you have Jasper and Garnet, and you essentially Steven is like, look, I want to try it my way. I don't know how. But it doesn't work, and Steven's way does not work, and it ends with Jasper escaping and grabbing Peridot, and then they get on the ship. There's a big fight, and basically all the crystal gems end up on the ship, and Garnet is like, you have to go. I think they hit Sorry, I keep fucking doing that. Jasper, I'm trying really hard, I promise. She ties them up in revenge in a way that they can't get out of, so they can't just like fuse. But Steven isn't tied up, and Garnet's like, you can't be here. You can't do this, and they're on the ship going in space. And Steven's like, I think Greg's there as well, but he's watching this. And Steven's like, no, I can do this. And she's like, you're not ready. You're not ready. And Garnet's like, Amethyst, and Amethyst lassos him, and they throw him out the ship, but they're just trying to like, he's like parachuting with the lasso. Basically, they're not putting him in danger. They're getting him out of the dangerous situation. Mm-hmm. But just at the moment they push him, so he's going off the ship. Jasper, boom! She puts the ship into hyperdrive. It makes the lasso break, but it goes a lot further than they wanted. So Steven is now plummeting to the earth. And you're thinking, shit, is this the moment that he's going to suddenly produce a weapon? Is he suddenly going to burst to life? What's happening? He's falling. No weapons are coming. He's not going to get saved that way. What's happening? And then suddenly, whoosh! Lapis has seen Steven falling, and she arcs the water in the ocean to arc up and safely catch Steven. He hits the water with an impact and passes out, but he is safe because she has saved him by basically using the water to cushion the fall. She slowly brings him down to the ground and gives him to Greg. And so all of that, so in terms of your point about the villain being defeated, it's interesting because when I did my beat sheet, I had all my beats and it literally went from the gems fight, Peridot and Jasper, and the crystal gems are captured and get taken away, and then Steven falls in the water and thing. Mm-hmm. And I went, oh, well, I could just go straight from one to the other then. But I wanted that time with some crystal gem stuff. I wanted Peridot to get a moment. I wanted Jasper and Amethyst to interact. I couldn't quite work out where to put that song, which I also really wanted. And I didn't. It felt like, because essentially, if there is an act structure, the final act is, this situation in space. And I was like, "That's
this is your low point, isn't it? This is your end of act 2.
Yeah, exactly.
This is the
but what I'm saying is,
this is the character having to sort of like overcome the obstacle now to sort of get back to their original status quo. So like this is,
but Steven was always going to fall.
Go on, sorry.
Steven was always going to fall though. The bit that I've added today was was them capturing them and going back to the temple. So it was. I had to.
Oh, I see. So in your original, like, just to clarify, when you say you skipped, you didn't necessarily skip. It's just that fight originally ended with them basically capturing the crystal gems.
It was funny because not necessarily. I just had the beats. And the beats when I laid out the beats that I had and then structured them, it was structured in a way that the beat that I had after Crystal Gems fight Jasper and Peridot, and I had, the Lapis song and all of that stuff. The very next beat I had was Jasper captures the Crystal Gems and takes them away. And I went, oh, well, that fight at the kindergarten could just end with Jasper winning, which, to your point, it's funny because when you then said, is there an issue that the villain gets defeated? I couldn't say it because I didn't want to spoil what happened, but essentially at one point, Jasper wasn't defeated. The beats I had was just that she won, but I felt it was important. I wanted the stuff I've just described. I wanted the Greg, I wanted the Peridot, I wanted, do you see what I mean? So I think it's interesting because I think you add a lot of character stuff by having that. And from an executive producer point of view, you get a fair bit of comedy with the Peridot stuff. Peridot could be the kid's favourite character as a result of that master plan song.
Yeah, and you get a chance to do more character work, which will always invest an audience in a battle. Because if you care about the people that are in a situation, then you're going to be more invested. So yeah, I'm on board. I think that's probably of the two options. I think it's better to. If that's what your options are, it is better to sacrifice a little bit of your villain's threat if it means you can get a bunch of character stuff out of it, than making the villain very threatening, but then you just sort of like it's just A to B story and there's no actual character work or development happening.
So what do you think of all that stuff? The capture, the fool, the Lapis, the Peridot, the
you're sort of at the end of of Act 2. I think that's a really smart I think there's a lot of really great choices because, again, you've created a situation where you've managed to make those two plots sort of come together in a way. Because, again, I couldn't make them line up. I had the two pieces and they were going one after the other. But you found a way to intertwine them so they're happening simultaneously, the Lapis and the sort of Jasper elements.
Do you know what I think helped? Because as much as and I'm not trying to big because you did the same, and I'm not trying to big either of us up, but as much as there are points where I'm like, I don't know, somehow they capture Jasper.
Sure.
Actually, all of this what I have got is still a shitload of work, and I put a lot of work into working out. Right, if this is the story I want to tell, I need to do a bit of Ocean Gem, Mirror Gem, and I need to do a bit of the Return and Jailbreak. Yeah, and I need to make those work together. And that was really hard. But I think what helped me...
Tell me about it. I gave up. Yeah. I fucking know it is. That was my initial idea, and I couldn't make it function. So yeah, 10 points.
What I think helped me and hindered you is you have a better natural memory of those episodes, and it got to the point where I went, I'll watch those 4 episodes and that will help me, and I went, nope, that will make it worse, because then it will be, you need to get this in, you need to get that in, that contradicts with that. Having a blank slate that basically contained the characters and the oomph of it all, the what happened of it all, I think that's probably why you gave up, whereas I powered through with it and eventually, hopefully, kind of got there.
Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, truthfully, the biggest criticism I have so far isn't really even valid based on the little preamble we gave before we started, which is like just about worrying about how you'd execute some of the exposition at the beginning, because you've got a lot of information coming in a very short space of time, because you get you set up a lot of the world very quickly, but that again in execution could be fine. Other than that, it's a really clever, compelling approach to getting straight to Jailbreak without really feeling like you've made any huge sacrifices. The actual story doesn't feel rushed. I'd be concerned about information overload, but your story is very, very well paced, I think. So, hopefully. So I think I'm on board, and let's find out how it ends. Let's get to it. I'm excited.
So Greg wakes Stephen up, and they at one point this all took place at the temple, and then I was like, we've hardly got any Beach City. So they go to the donut. They're in the town of Beach City, so there's some interactions with a townie or something. Oh, they're in the town.
Sorry, I didn't actually compliment you on one of the things. Sorry, by the way, which is forcing Lapis to become the good guy by putting Stephen in danger is also extremely smart because the show had to do a lot of work to slowly have her come around to Stephen. You've given her a very, very immediate reason to need to help him. So yeah, I thought it was also clever.
Yeah, and I love that visual. In the way that I don't think it's as good as your visual of Lapis and the whole. Well, it's not competition, but the whole globe and the rain hitting it and it looking like glass. But I do love that visual, and I love the obvious. I feel like the obvious thing to do is as he's falling, Stephen gets his shield or can suddenly fly, and I love the notion that we're not quite there just yet, and we have the water.
Yeah, and you know that you're in a position there where you're in the know audience. Would be wondering about shields and bubbles and other solutions and floating and all the other potential Stephen powers that could save him. And I think that would almost be a benefit to you because it would almost hide the surprise. It would disguise your not twist as such, but it would disguise the surprise of Lapis being the one to save him. Whereas, funnily enough, I think the audience. the not in the know audience would be like, well, Lapis will save him, surely. So in a weird way, you've created a twist that only really works for people who know the show, which is a strange scenario to be in, but it works really well. So yeah,
hopefully they'd be like, well, that's a fucking great visual. And by the way, like it is all of Lapis's might to get that water up there to save him, and that's a fucking bitchin' shot of Saoirse Ronan as she's doing it and using that power to do that, and then just gives him to Greg and fucks off. Just walks into the ocean. So Stephen and Greg they go into town and they have a conversation about how Stephen thinks it's all his fault and he's feeling really low and guilty. And then this is what I've written. Greg sings the dad song. He doesn't know how much. He doesn't know much, but he knows Stephen should be who he is and have faith in that. It's a dad advice song from Greg. I love the idea of what I was talking about earlier, that this is me of it all. If you can do a song, a bit like Go Gentle by Robbie Williams. Whatever you think of Robbie Williams, if you're a dad, you should check out that song. It's beautiful. And it's maybe not rhythmically like that, but it's the dad song. It's Greg giving Stephen the advice, and the advice is go with your gut. So Stephen decides to go with his gut, and he goes, right, well, I've got to find Lapis. And they go off determined, and they get to the beach, and Greg goes, huh, and the ocean's gone. and Greg goes, well, I guess we've got a clue as to how to find Lapis, or something like that.
Sure.
And Stephen goes to find her, and he goes to speak to her, and he's begging her to help. And she is taken. It's not all the ocean. It's maybe it's the bit of the sea from Beach City. I don't know because, she's not got her powers, which I've never stated actually. But the fact that she's cracked and doesn't have her powers is still in my head. Is a thing for Lapis. I should have stated that actually. But yeah, she's a powerless Lapis, right? Mm-hmm. And so she's got a bit of the ocean, and she's created a kind of whirlpool for herself, which she's sat on. Mm-hmm. So Stephen goes up there, and he tries to talk to her, and he talks about how weak he is, and how he wants her to help, and she's refusing. She's not going to do that, and it's really quite, it's dramatic. And Stephen's begging her, and she won't do it, and he begins to cry. And she gives him a hug, and he cries. And as he cries, his tears land on her gem, and her gem heals itself. And Stephen says, what? And he says, everyone said that Mum had healing powers. I didn't know they meant literally healing powers. And she's like, I can heal. Is that a good or a bad?
No, that's good. That's really good. That's clever. Right. Because I suppose purists would go, but it's his spit that's healing. But I mean, I didn't even bother with either of them because I was just like, I have no time to set up how he has healing powers. Just if we establish that Rose. Yeah,
was it his tears? Wasn't it his tears with Lars? Or have I got that wrong?
What's that? Sorry, his tears
with Lars.
Yeah, his tears were what turned Lars into a lion of sorts. But that wasn't healing, was it? That was whatever power. So a lot of people theorize that Rose licked a lion, because their powers are the other way around. So Rose's tears were healing, and her spit could bring people back from the dead, whereas Steven's spit is healing and his tears can bring people back from the dead. That's the theory. But
for the 2 points for the naysayers, 1, doesn't really matter, and 2, he's resurrected her gem, not healed it. I'm joking.
Yeah, I mean, look, I was even lazier about it because I was just like, well, he's got those powers. You establish that Rose had them. You don't establish how that worked, tears or whatever, and then you don't have to waste valuable movie time explaining how it works. He just touches her gem and he learns how to do it in the moment of need where it really is important because he wants to help this person. What you've done, which is clever, is you've given him a reason to cry and therefore had the tears do it, which is, I think, totally functions because it's not untrue to the show because that's how Rose could do it. So
we've not talked a lot about, like, this has all been about plot, not like how the characters are, but Steven's got that childlike joy, and I really love that human comedic element to Steven is very much there, and I love the idea of him being like, I didn't realise, literally, like, just that could be really played out if done right, really funny. Mm-hmm. So they then they're so excited by this and swept up in the moment that Lapis has this inspiring Let It Go style song about taking flight, and she can now take flight, and they fly around Beach City and they fly around the world. And Steven's excited too because he thinks they're going to space. And then they land, and it's clear that she's not necessarily going to take him to space. First of all, they land by Greg, and Steven's like, you didn't tell me she could literally heal people. And Greg's like, yeah, she could do that. And then after taking the flight song, Steven is begging Lapis to take him to the gems on the ship. She's kind of refusing, and he's like, yeah, but all I've done for you, please, just help me. You don't have to get involved in the fight. You just have to take me there, please, for me. Just take me there. And she's beginning to come round, and at one point she says, Steven, we don't even know that you can breathe in space. And Steven makes a childish, frustrated noise. He's like, blah, blah, blah. Suddenly Steven's in a bubble. And Lapis and Steven are like, And Steven looks at Greg, and Greg goes, yep, she could do that too. So yeah,
yeah, it's good.
So then Lapis sighs and they fly. Lapis holds up Steven in the bubble and they fly into space.
Awesome.
So they at one point, you could still do this. At one point, I'd given Greg this characteristic that he mainly communicated through his guitar. So, like, instead of seeing the ocean and going, huh, he was going to see the ocean and it would be like, like, it would be a little confused. And in this scene, the notion originally was that Greg was in the ocean, and as Lapis went into space, she let the ocean go, and it began to chase after Greg, and he starts running, and he's playing the guitar, and it's like, no, like, it's really scared, and then halfway you think he's going to burst into another song, and then he just goes, oh, you know what, this is probably taking valuable energy away from me, and he throws the guitar away, and he continues to run. You could maybe do that. I don't know. I thought it was quite a funny image.
Yeah, no, it's funny, and it helps you establish Greg a bit more than you've already done. It's nice to. It's good to make sure that we get like scenes for all these characters, not just that they're present, because otherwise it's like, why write them into the script if they don't do anything, you know? And that was kind of one of the problems I had with my Greg in my pitch, was that I didn't really, other than having a few moments where he was a bit encouraging with Steven, there wasn't a lot of purpose for Greg in my script.
Which is, to be honest with you, is the other advantage of doing it as a musical, because they might not be around. Like I said, to be honest with you, Pearl gets the raw deal.
From my perspective, all I had was he was functional for the final fight because they needed music to defeat the water copies of themselves, and Greg's van plus amps meant that they could do that, and it was him that swings the guitar that gives Steven the idea. But other than that, he didn't really have as much purpose, sadly, in my version.
The advantage of a musical is if everyone has a song, because sometimes it's not even about purpose, it's just about the audience going, why were they there? But if everyone has a song, they go, well, they got that moment, they had a moment to shine. I would want to, in the execution of this, include more for Pearl than I've included in the beat sheet. Mm-hmm. She's, other than the training thing at the beginning, she doesn't have too much. I did think at one point, but I haven't worked out how to fit it into what I'm going through now. You have Pearl say to Lapis, you really need to get over the past. And then Lapis says something like, I spent thousands of years in a mirror. And they just look at each other for a moment. And if you're in the know, you know what that means. If you don't, then you don't. It's a little tease for what comes later. I'd like to find a way to work that in. I think that's a nice moment. So they go up to the ship. Stephen and Lapis go onto the ship, and Lapis is really torn because she wants to make sure Stephen's safe. Or no, I think at one point the logistics again, but maybe they get captured right away because it doesn't matter if they get captured because they escape the same way they escape in the show. So Stephen and Lapis meet Ruby. I don't know if you could get this actress for such a small part, but Ruby, Letitia White, right, from obviously Black Mirror and Shuri from the MCU. You really sell it on, look, it's just a cameo, please, but I think she's got the comedic chops to be able to do it. She's got that energy. I've seen pictures of her with her hair up where she really has to look. I think it would be quite cool. Obviously, you don't know. It plays out similarly to the show. You don't know that Ruby's panicking, blah, 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 blah. Lapis can't help but be entertained by both Ruby and Sapphire, who reunite, and in the same way that they do in the show, suddenly form Garnet. And then we have Jasper begin to confront Garnet. Now, the key... So, that's why it was so... I wanted to use this to talk about, but for me, when I thought, what do I want to do with a movie? All the things that the Lapis story and the notions of, talking and notions of learning and the notions of acceptance and the discrimination that people can feel, all of that stuff, the Ruby and Sapphire of it all is the story I wanted to tell. The reason fusion is seen as so joyous throughout the film and such a wonderful thing, the reason Garnet is this huge, amazing presence is so that in the moment that the twist for some and not for others, that Garnet is a permafusion, is revealed, hopefully it's executed in a way where the audience go, that's what Jasper's against. That's what she's got a problem with. That wonderful thing that we saw save 3 townies. The notion, not saying Opal's a thing, but the notion of fusion. I was trying to show that, and that's why it's a superpower, because it's just like, that's just what it is, and that's what Ruby and Sapphire should be. So that's for that reveal, for that Ruby Sapphire moment is kind of why that stuff's there. That's equally why, the way you described it with the Prejudice is easy. The analogies against racism, homophobia, all of those, transgender, all of the things that the show is the analogy for. The analogies are obvious, and Lapis is someone. Jasper's whole thing, the whole point of that song that Jasper sings, is Jasper can't get over the nurture. Jasper is the person that was raised in a household that was always discriminating and can't get that out of their mindset. Lapis is the person that was also raised in that mindset, but has experienced enough other shit to potentially not be overtly shitty to Garnet, be wary because her nature has made her wary, but not as bad as Jasper. The analogies I'm trying to make are as clear as they are in the show against discrimination like that. But that's what I love about that song of Jasper. That's what I love about this kind of moment. Hopefully, it will say to children, Jasper's the bad guy because Jasper's going, this is the way I was raised. Fuck it. You gotta listen, and you gotta see that actually Ruby and Sapphire, this love, this connection is a wonderful thing. That's what I'm trying to do with the movie. So with that in mind, Garnet looks at Stephen and says, go find the others. I'll take care of her. And obviously the fans are sat there thinking, well, what are they going to do instead? and then you hear it. You hear those chimes. You hear it building, and you think, "Fuck me, this sounds familiar." And then Garnet goes, "This is Garnet. 2 on whatever the lyrics are. No, this is Garnet.
Back together.
Back together again." And we have Stronger Than You in the movie, which is why I was really cagey earlier when you were like, "No songs," because in my head I'm like,
you know what? I kind of sussed out when you introduced the minute you introduced Jasper and Peridot. I went, "That's why he was being cagey earlier." I put it together then, but yeah, really, that's going to be a great moment because if you have done no other songs from the show, there's definitely going to be a concern at this point that you're not doing any other shows, any other songs, but. To burst
you have
into
to do Stronger Than You.
I think
you have to do.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
you have to.
Yeah, and you can even hear it. You could, I don't know, you can just hear the music rising and starting to say it initially, and then start to sing it, like go into the song. So like, this is Garnet back together, and I'm never going down at the hands of the likes to you. And she sort of like starts getting rhythmic, and it builds into a song from so it's like a dialogue transition into music. And for a film that would work very well. So absolutely go for it. Yeah, incredible.
So that you don't spoil that in the marketing. You present it as, there's only We Are the Crystal Gems, and hopefully hopefully
you wouldn't show anything
released
past
and shit.
Honestly, if I was marketing up this version, I wouldn't show anything past Stephen and Lapis on the beach before Jasper and Peridot arrive.
Well, you wouldn't even show Jasper and Peridot in the
new.
Yeah, wow.
Because people would assume essentially you're doing the movie I pitched. They would assume it's the story of Stephen versus Lapis, and then the excitement and the joy that fans would get out of that, and then obviously the audience are on the ride anyway, so that's a separate issue. But I don't see why you would reveal that, because that's I think you could absolutely. There's enough. You've got enough visual stuff in the first act and a half to get away with doing that, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Right, so you do Jasper and Garnet, and obviously Garnet defeats Jasper. Doesn't poof her, but very much captures her or leaves her defeated. I don't know, but I at some point want Jasper to sing a little bit of the refrain from her "This Is Who I Am" song. This is who we are. No, earlier on it's "This Is Who We Are." A slowed down, almost piano, just 30-second version where she angrily sings "This Is Who I Am," where she's refusing. You can't work out whether she's clearly upset at being defeated, but you can't work out whether she's regretting her ways, just angry that she's been defeated. You don't know, but that song comes back, but it's not a triumphant factual version. It's a sad kind of haunting version.
Did you consider there's quite a common practice in musicals to have this sort of the dueling songs trope? So while Garnet is singing "Stronger Than You," you add, so you still get all of "Stronger Than You" uninterrupted, but you add an extra chorus in terms of the layout of it, and write the Jasper song so that rhythmically it can be sung alongside "Stronger Than You" as like a response to it. So you get them singing over each other, like I don't know. There's a word for it when they do that, when two characters sing over each other.
Know, yeah, maybe I'm up for that. Yeah.
There's you could probably do it where they both sort of they're almost talking it. They're singing their songs, and it's sort of the two pieces fit together. When you stick them over each other, I feel like there's some. I don't know exactly, but I think there's something there that you could do that could be really powerful and pretty cool.
Cool. Yeah. No, I'm up for that. I don't know. They get separated. Jasper ends up on her own. Garnet goes off to find the crystal gems. Mm-hmm. So Garnet
does she not just defeat her like she does in the show?
She does, but what happens next requires Jasper has a take two. Basically, that's not the big finale,
right?
So the big finale, we then get Jasper facing off against the crystal gems, and maybe they're behind a door when the door's slowly revealed. We find a way to do this without going, wouldn't you just launch an attack, blah, 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 blah. But basically, crystal gems, Lapis hiding, Jasper says to Amethyst, you should be fighting with me, da-da-da-da-da. This is who you are. And Amethyst goes, I'm a crystal gem. And they're in their hero poses, and Steven's there. And then Jasper goes, okay, well, let's introduce all the crystal gems. And Jasper produces bubbles with gems in. And we realise that Jasper is so fucked up that when Earth was attacked, or when on visits back to Earth, as we've seen with Biggs Jasper, Jasper has been collecting the corrupted crystal gems. And at this point, Jasper reveals to Steven I think maybe you had in the scene, maybe, I think I haven't quite pinned this down. I think in the scene where Steven finds Amethyst and... No, this wouldn't work. At some point, it's explained I think at this point, the truth of how the gems got corrupted. The fact that Homeworld gems corrupted everyone on Earth gets revealed. And Steven's like, how did you guys survive? And someone says, Rose shielded us. And at this point, whether this happens in this scene or not, whatever. So Jasper's got these corrupted crystal gems, and she unpoofs them. And through discussion, this element of it is so effective, but I don't know if it's been done as overtly as this in the show. Not saying this is better, but I just think this overtly really plays on an angle. The full horror of corruption as these corrupted, messed up crystal gems begin to form around Jasper is laid bare in that moment. The crystal gems that we know are watching corrupted versions of their friends come to life to attack them. And there's a whole load of them. And you could do nice nods for the fans here. So you have... That's why she specifically poofs Biggs Jasper earlier. You also, I really like this, you could have Snowflake Obsidian, who we've never actually seen in an uncorrupted form. She got referenced by Bismuth loads, and then I believe this is right, and then we saw her in Change Your Mind. So
I think we have seen Snowflake Obsidian's corrupted form.
Okay, I may be wrong with that.
I think Snowflake Obsidian's corrupted form was the big ice monster.
When I was on the wiki earlier, Ice Monster seemed to be a different gem.
Oh,
I might be wrong.
You might be right. No, I will do. Out of curiosity, I'll just do a little bit of Google and see if I can settle that, so we can settle it on the podcast and not have anyone, going away like, what are you guys talking about? But yeah, fine. Yeah, Karen.
Well, no, just you just looking up while because then I'll keep building.
No, okay, yeah, I'll look at. I was pulling it up, but I didn't want you to interrupt the flow of your.
No, it's all right. Just I'll call it out and then I'll get back in the flow.
Unclear. No, yeah. At the moment, there's no. No, not directly. No, not at all. Definitely not.
Yeah, as far as I could see from that, we've never seen her.
No, you're right.
So that could be a cool thing for the fans. And like I say, I really want to, because we've embedded it earlier. How did they survive? And I really want the horror of corruption to be on display as the crystal gems line up to face this kind of mini army of corrupted crystal gems that are about to attack them. I don't know if you need Lapis yelling this at this point or you just have it being said, but they're lining up and the crystal gems seem fucked. And then Lapis is begging him again. I think probably you'd do it a different way because we've had a lot of Lapis begging Steven to leave the fight. And the idea is... so Lapis says, what are you going to do? She says, leave the fight. He refuses. She says, well, what are you going to do? And Steven thinks for a moment. And they're lined up in their hero poses. And then Steven says, when you said Rose shielded you, you meant literally, didn't you? Pearl, yeah. Garnet, of course. Amethyst, duh. Steven smiles a determined smile. The corrupted gems rush towards them. Poof! Steven's got a motherfucking shield. Big fight. Big song. You could do We Are the Crystal Gems here instead of, earlier.
Sure.
Big ass battle. Looks great. Cool. Fine. In the battle, at some point, I don't know whether they're working against a corrupted gem or whether they have a mini fight, but you get a Peridot Lapis interaction. You get just a little hint of them doing something as a pair. You just, for the fans, you just get that them doing something together moment.
Mm-hmm.
The ship begins to crash. It's fucked. It's flying everywhere. It's madness. Steven starts to try and save everyone. And Lapis is observing this. And Steven and Lapis have a conversation about how... And Lapis is like, why are you trying to... Because I think he maybe he saves Peridot. He does something. Lapis is like, what are you doing? And he's like, this is the right thing to do. And she watches the way he cares for Garnet and the way Garnet cares for him, and she's observing everything while this big battle of this ship being destroyed and this fucking ships in space, and there's bubbles and there's madness, and it's awesome. But fundamentally, Lapis and Steven at one point like have a really impactful conversation as all this is happening. It's madness. It falls. They end up. I don't really know. Maybe just because I thought it was a cool visual to do bubbles and stuff outside of the ships. But maybe they're still on the ship for this to work. But somehow the ship crashes back on Earth. Basically, this is the big climactic fight. But it ends with the ship crashed back on Earth. I like the notion that somewhere in this madness, because I'm kind of changing it a bit, because I think in the show Steven's always in the bubbles. In this, he can kind of produce the bubbles, and I like that the idea is Peridot gets bubbled and then fucks off like Darth Vader. Right. Darth Vader spinning away in the escape pod in A New Hope. That's Peridot in this. Gotcha. She goes off somewhere. Everyone else ends up back on Earth. They get out of the wreckage. It's madness. They stand up. Jasper cannot believe she's been defeated again, and she decides to give in. And she looks at Lapis and she says, "Fuse with me." And Lapis says, "What?" And she says, "Fuse with me. We can take them on and we can end this. We can end the fighting if you fuse with me." Steven's like, "Don't listen to him. Don't listen to... Don't listen to her. Don't listen to her." She's like, "We can end this." Lapis looks at Steven. She looks at Garnet. Her face gets this determined look. She looks back at Steven. She fuses with Jasper. It's grotesque. It's horrible. And then, just like the show, the chains appear. She captures her in the fusion by creating chains from the water. It's epic. And she drags them down to the ocean. And all the crystal gems are stunned. And Steven says, "She listened to me." And Amethyst laughs and says, "She saved you." And Pearl says, "She saved us." And then with a tear in her eyes, Garnet says, "She saved me." And then we fade. Mm-hmm. Greg's popping up in the background, I don't know. But the notion is, Jasper doesn't listen. Jasper can't let go of her nature, of the way she feels she was raised. Lapis listens. The reason Lapis saves them is because of a conversation. Steven's learned how to fight a bit better, but fundamentally what saves the day is a conversation and Lapis being willing to learn. We fade back to a scene, maybe some sort of cleanup or something like that. And all the crystal gems are stood there, looking out at the ocean. And Pearl says, "Should we do some training?" And Steven says, "Maybe I should listen to her." And he walks off. And someone says, "Where are you going?" And he says, "I'm going to go see if I can make a friend." And the movie ends with Steven walking down the beach towards the girl who's been sat there reading. And then the bonus scene is Peridot going down underground and dialing some numbers. And then a gem face pops up, and Peridot says, "I need to speak to Yellow Diamond."
Okay, cool. Yeah.
There you go.
I wasn't sure. There was two ways that was going to go then, that Peridot scene. You were either going to set up the cluster, like she's going to go to check on the cluster, or you were setting up the diamonds. Very cool.
Yeah, I mean, it could in reality be either, but the bonus scene is Peridot going back to the kindergarten and setting some shit up.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's funny because there's less to unpack there, because a lot of that is like just like you moved all the chess pieces. We discussed all the chess pieces being moved, and then then it was just a matter of checkmate, wasn't it? Like, not that it wasn't entertaining. Obviously, it was really fun to hear that play out. But I want to I want to pick up on some of the choices you made that were a little bit outside of what was expected. Let's talk a little bit about the corrupted gems, the battle with those. That's an interesting choice. Do you think that maybe, if I was playing devil's advocate, I would suggest that maybe if they fight a corrupted gem right at the beginning, in a fun "we are the crystal gems" sort of way, to turn them into a horror show at the end when they haven't previously been established as that. Do you think that's, I mean, contradictory is the wrong word, but you not think those two ideas are kind of at odds with each other? Because I like it. You're playing on a much darker version of that premise. One that really does play on the true horror of the corruption, which, the closest thing we've had to that in the show was the forced fusion parts in the, for the cluster. So I was curious.
It's also,
I think it's a cool idea to play on the horror of it. But do you think that's slightly at odds with the slightly more Monster of the Week version of it you've got up top of the movie?
Yeah, just because I didn't say, by the way, there's obviously also a big song at that point.
Wait, what was that, sorry?
Make clear. There's a big song during that battle as well, just to make clear, in case people are like, he's forgotten about the music. Like, there's a big song.
Yeah, any scene that they're around there, there's a big song happening.
Yeah, I really. So you probably couldn't get an explanation into the movie without it being clunky. But one headcanon thing in my head is, and I don't know if this applies to Big Bird actually, but it's the gems they fight at the beginning, and even in the kindergarten scene, are corrupted gems, not corrupted crystal gems.
I think that's very. That's clear. But do you not think that, like, that's the difference between, like, if you fight a zombie, it's still pretty horrific. It's certainly more horrific if that zombie happens to be someone you used to know, for sure. That adds to it.
Yeah.
But you're obviously in your opening, they are still essentially fighting a zombie. So do you think? If I'm using that metaphor,
it would need a lot of work. It would need. So for me, I wanted a big battle, and I wanted them to be fighting something. I toyed with, like, at one point I was going to have, because I also wanted it to be cleared up and to tie it all into corruption in a real like, to make that part of the plot. At one point, I was going to have Yellow Diamond cut warp pad into the ship. And hold out her hand, and the dialogue would be something like, this is what corrupted the gems last time. Well, all three of them. But it was just too clunky, too complicated. So I'm like, what could Stephen be putting his shield up against? And I want to explore that element more, the notion of how horrific it is. And I think if again, it's one of those things, and it's potentially a cop-out answer, but if you execute it right, if you have you forgotten who you're fighting? Or, you pretend that this doesn't, you pretend that they're just monsters. They're not, they're your family. If you have Jasper really dig in and remind them of the horror of it, then, and maybe you do a flashback at some point during one of the songs, and the other crystal gems you see in the flashback are the corrupted gems Jasper then produced. So you really
you set up the specific gems first.
You set up how vindictive it is.
That would kind of, I think that would kind of solve that as a concern, I think.
Yeah, you could do that maybe. Maybe when Lapis is explaining it or something, I don't know. So you could do that. Again, it's all about execution. It's a really good point, but they had to fight something. There had to be a reason for Stephen's shield. Although I suppose maybe not, but I like the notion of him, by the end, he's got he's got powers. And I like the slight gag of, wait, you mean literally shielded, don't you? I like that becomes a bit of a thing. So yeah, that's it's cop out, but that's all in execution again, I think. But I think it's a really good point, and it is a clear juxtaposition between what they're doing at the beginning and the end. But I think but there could be something quite cool in that. Like, you see two similar scenes play out, but once you've had the detail, it suddenly twists how it's happening.
Yeah, that's the reason why not. It was just a thought that I had because it's just like it's a cool idea, but if it's not properly established, I'm not sure how it maybe isn't as impactful as you maybe would like it to be. And that's the shame of it, because I almost want it to work as well as I know it could work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think the answer could be a flashback. I think it's one of those things where most of like that it was for ages on my beat sheet. It was there's a fight, and it was then like the details of like, oh shit, what are they actually fighting? Because a lot of the work and the thinking time went into what do I want to do with Garnet, Ruby, Sapphire, Jasper? What do I want to do with Lapis? What ideas do I want to get across? I want to get across, have a conversation. I want to get across, be open to changing your mind. I want to get across that some people are just, it's not their fault that they're the way they are. It's the way they were built or grown. I wanted to get across. I mean, I wanted to make that is the
plot that you tell when you do that Garnet story. When you do Peridot Jasper, when you go there, that's the plot you tell for sure. And if I was to have gone further in mine and worked out the sequel to that movie, which obviously I set up the existence of Peridot, then I've already told by that point. Then in the pitch I gave, I've already set up Stephen as Stephen's confidence in his ability to sort of be a crystal gem and find his place on the team. So the next story you tell is about accepting you as you are. Like, that's the next logical story, and that's why I think Connie fit nicely into mine. By the way, I should compliment you on that. I thought you came across the same issue that I did, which is that she doesn't really have much place in the first story, but you found a way to introduce her and make it a character moment and a defining moment for Stephen. Which I think works.
Yeah, and I think, and I to state again, I think your way of doing it, concentrate on Lapis, and then do the Garner and the Jasper of it all, is probably the right way to do it. The reason I didn't was to A, be a bit different, and B, if I was concentrating on the Lapis, I think I probably would have put together a more concrete story like you did. But if we're gonna go bigger, then my version of bigger was, well, fuck it. What would I want to? What's the heart and the point that I want to get across? So it was just to be different, and I think hands down, the zeroing in that you did in yours is probably actually the right way to do it.
Well, I suppose it depends what you're. It depends what you're
looking for. The bombastic.
Yeah, exactly. So mine was subtler, but therefore maybe less less action packed, less like that sort of fun sort of chaos you do sometimes get from the show Steven Universe. Like yours is, you're basically looking at the other angle of the show. You know what I mean? Like it's like that. The show is sometimes kind of like subtle and charactery, and not not as much on the action beats, and more about like characters reacting to situations, and their problems with each other and all that. But then you get episodes like Change Your Mind, which was like so much, despite the power of some of the emotional stuff at the end of that episode. Let's be honest, most of Change Your Mind was just like fun chaos. That's a big element. And I think that's a big element of Steven Universe that was lost a little bit in my approach. So it's you for what you may have lost in simplicity and clarity, maybe in just like having a cleaner, simpler through plot that required a lot, requires a lot less, jumping through hoops to get to. If you can successfully jump through your hoops, you've arguably got a funner movie. I don't know.
What did you think of? I said I don't know. It's without seeing the execution, it's impossible to tell.
Yeah, well, exactly. So this is something I want to clarify as well from what I was talking about in the last episode. Which when I'm going like, you couldn't. Yeah, I think I should have said this at the time, but when I'm saying, you couldn't make that work, you couldn't make this work, I'm saying I couldn't make those things work, which is why I chose not to do them. I wasn't suggesting another writer couldn't approach it differently. I'm just from the what I wanted to achieve with it, and I was very much wanted I was going subtle and slow and character based.
Because if you think about it, if we don't need to look that, because in really talented hands, potentially both pitches could work. Because we don't need to look that far for an example of how do you make complex execution and character work apply in a short space of time. Yeah, think what Steven Universe does in 11 minutes. It is possible. Think of the setup in some huge movies. It is possible. I was really pleased just because it's gone on, and I think both girlfriends are probably starving. I was really pleased though with she saved you, she saved us, she saved me. Like I thought, I was pleased with that when I came.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's really good. There's an awful lot to like. It's like I said, the biggest criticisms I was able to level at it were early on when I was like, there's a lot of exposition. But like again, as you pointed out, that is all in the execution. So it's hard for me to even judge that you've not achieved that, because that is definitely achievable. So it's
I didn't give my Sapphire casting. Yara Shahidi from Blackish and Grownish, and The Sun Is Also a Star.
That's good casting.
Yeah, I saw, I think it was a trailer maybe for The Sun Is Also a Star, and then I started watching clips of her, and I remembered her from Blackish, and I think she's so like strong for a 19-year-old. There's an interview where she talks about walking out of a photo shoot because she didn't because of a representation issue, as in how young women, I think it was, were being represented, or maybe young women of colour. I can't quite remember the details. She was just so headstrong, and it was so like, oh wow, you've clearly got a spark. And I think it would be, I loved the idea of when I pictured those two actresses as Ruby and Sapphire, and as Ruby and Sapphire together, it in my head really, really worked. So yeah, I did cast her as well.
Yeah, no, and I think that's good casting. I think that's not maybe an obvious choice, but often I think sometimes you don't going with the obvious one. Also, particularly she's great because she's that perfect level of we know she's a good actress. We've seen her in a lot of stuff, but she isn't exactly unknown. But she's unknown enough that people aren't going to come in with too much of a preconception about how she's going to perform that role, and like an archetype or anything like that. So.
I would argue, with the exception of Jack Black, who, hasn't headlined that many movies on his own. No, that's unfair. Goosebumps.
Yeah, I was going to say, for a while in the early thousands, and he was like a movie star.
But I did deliberately try and be a bit realistic with the casting. I went for people that, could work as an ensemble, and there isn't The Rock. There isn't a Robert Downey Jr. It really is an ensemble piece of
Again, I'm just really sad that Brad Pitt is not playing Mayor Dewey. That's all I'm saying.
Well, he could be. I mean, the townies could be anyone. Like, I haven't even worked out which townies are in it. So, although there are obvious opportunities for Lars and Sadie, who would probably be the priorities. At one point, I had Jamie say the "Are you one of the good ones or bad ones?" line, and then I was like, "Fucking, why would you not make it Lars?" Like, Lars is who the people would want, and Lars potentially, depending on what you did moving forward, is who you would want to have pre-set up as well.
Yeah, Jamie sadly has no real function in the overall story, but Lars arguably does.
So, for those interested, just very, very quickly, there are, I think, 9 songs. We Are the Crystal Gems, Pearl and Stephen's Training Montage, Stephen and the Mirror, Lapis, It's Not Me, I Don't Want to Fight, Paradox Master Plan, Jasper and Amethyst, This Is Who We Are, Greg's Dad's Song, Lapis's Taking Flight Song, Stronger Than You, and a Big Fight Song. I think you'd probably put 1 or 2 more in there at some points where shit's not really fleshed out, but at the core of it, everyone has a song. So yeah, at one point I was going to start with the camera panning round Earth in the middle of war, and the camera is panning round Rose, and it pans round that, and then it pans round her pregnant. Then it pans round her holding a sword, and then it pans round her pregnant with Greg, and then it pans round and it's Stephen.
Right,
and you do it all through the gem, and I didn't because there was no need for it. We don't go too into Rose; she's just this figure who's mentioned and in the background, because that was a what exposition do you need decision. And actually that scene was only really there to tease the sword stuff for later. The most obvious choice for Rose, I don't think you could get. I feel like the most obvious choice for Rose is Adele. There's no obvious sign that she's done acting. So in my head, I was considering Florence Welch from Florence and the Machine. So yeah,
that's interesting casting. But yeah, cool.
I'm trying to think if I had other. I think there are other bits, but I can't remember now, and I'm exhausted from all the talking. But yeah, I feel like people are gonna pick this way more because it's loose, and I've done way more egregious things, but. It's to have fun with it, and also it's to think of it from the point of view of an executive producer, and you'd kind of potentially fans would be talking about: are we going to get Jasper? Are we going to get Peridot? I wanted to get to Fusion and stuff, and you have to do a bit of some stuff from all of those stories has gone as a result. But that is the nature of the beast.
Yeah, and I made the same decision, but in reverse. I was like, I want to get to the Stephen being having to become a crystal gem and be accepted by the crystal gems story. And I was like, I kind of had to make a choice. It was like I'm either going to lean in heavy into the Fusion story and do, the garnet of it all, or I'm going to go the other way. And do it from the just stick with that angle for now and save the Fusion stuff for the sequel, essentially.
And you could level that at this. You really could go. There's not a lot of. Does Stephen go on a journey? He does. I just haven't gone into the detail of it. That would be in all execution, which if people want to say is a cop out, fine. That's fair enough. But I did think about everyone's arc, and with the proper execution, you'd see the flesh of Amethyst's arc. The only one that I was like, I don't know if they have one, was Pearl. Is the only character that I was like, I'm not sure she goes from an A point to a C point. I did. I think I don't have it on this bit of paper, but I did at one point attempt. Yeah, I don't have it here. So maybe Pearl. But yeah, but you could easily make hers. She's the most frightened of Stephen. She's the most protective of Stephen, and she learns that he has good ideas and learns to let go. And you have a moment in that final big fight where she lets him fly and do his thing, and he does it really well. So you could, again, with execution, as with yours, with execution, you could fix a lot of those obvious flaws.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I
mean,
so
next week.
Frustratingly, I kind of summed up my feedback slash my positive review like in the middle, because obviously the real glorious moment there where your story comes together for me is obviously the middle section where you bring in when you very cleverly weave Jasper and Peridot in from a structure standpoint. That just makes a lot of sense and is extremely clever.
The end of that is essentially the return and jailbreak, and then I think it's clear. It was probably clear then as well where I was going with the garnet of it all. So.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, then it is just connecting the dots, which was the same with mine. When you know the story, at a certain point in my one, there was an inevitability to everything that was about to happen. Like, it was very clear. So yeah, I think thumbs up all around. I think it's like I said, it would be a challenge to execute because of how much you front load the exposition for. You said they're aliens, that the gems are superheroes, there was a war, that the corrupted gems is what they're fighting. Like, you set all that up very quickly. And funnily enough, one of the, not criticisms, one of the things you sort of brought up with mine was, you're establishing that these monsters they're fighting are corrupted gems, but they've only fought one at this point in your story. And I was like, actually, no, they fought this one and this one. And you're like, oh yeah, okay, there's like two or three. And then like in your story, they only fight the one.
Yeah.
So the same problem is present basically. So it's I don't know if but that's about it in terms of my feedback, which is like that's minor stuff really. I think on the whole, with more refining, more development, like more figuring it out, that could just as easily be a brilliant Steven Universe movie. So I think I'm really pleased. I think you undersold it. I think you were a bit harsh on yourself.
Well, I think we did such I think I really wanted to set up that it would be a very different type of pitch to the one you did. I think we both did very different things.
Yeah,
we both did the things I would expect both of us to do. But
yeah, you went for plot. I went for character, as always.
Yeah, exactly.
As always,
exactly.
Yeah.
Cool. Right. We will have a review. We will again. We don't know the exact. We're not going to make any promises for when it will be up, but we promise you, we are both taking steps, which we have. Yeah. We're Dan. Yeah.
Yeah. We should hopefully have a plan in place for tonight for when we're going to be able to record a podcast reviewing.
Yeah, and it involves me, fucking up my holiday days with work and potentially Dan moving his birthday plans around. So we promise you, as soon as we can,
yes,
we will put up the review of the movie.
Yeah. I'm kind of amazed. I've just realised, that this is, despite the fact that you kept saying, I won't have as much as that.
I know.
You're aware this is 30 minutes longer than my one.
Yeah, and I don't know whether the noise I heard earlier was Jess serving dinner or giving up and deciding to cook dinner. So we shall see whether my dinner is cold or just about to come out the oven. But yeah, no, thank you, for listening. Sorry these last two have been fun, but they're really different exercise. And hopefully people enjoyed them.
Yeah, I would hope so. I think, I can't see any reason why not. It was a fun little experiment, and I'm glad you kind of got into it because there was a point when I think you were just going to do the simple version of it, and I think when I think because you I think you saw that I think you once I read out my pitch, correct me if I'm wrong here, you sort of went, oh, that is a fun little game to see if I can work out how to do it, because I feel like a little bit when you started the last episode. You felt like I was a madman for being like, I'm going to work out how this functions. But I think you then saw that I'd put it together and gone, oh, that could be quite a fun little experiment to work out if I'm capable of pulling that story together.
I don't honestly know how much it was that and how much it was that rabbit hole thing we talked about earlier. I think it was. I think it was shit. If I'm questioning and if I don't know... Because it ended up, and it's the right way to do this, but because it ended up being dissection, I think the impact your episode had was, shit, we're going to end up, quite rightly, dissecting mine just as much as we did Dan's. And I don't say quite rightly because I did it to Dan, he should do it to me, me because that's the most interesting way to approach it. If we're going to end up dissecting it as much, mine needs to be... as thought out, and I need to do some of that dissection. I can't just go, oh yeah, and then Lapis puts an arch in the water and it saves Stephen. I need to work out why he's falling, why he's not there. Sure. I need to work out, if I'm going to do Garnet and I want to tell that story and the nature versus nurture of it all, I need to work out how I am able to tell that story. And that job is not done until there's a final script, which is why it's not completely done here. Well, that's why many, many times I've gone, that's all in the execution. But at least the framework for it had to be worked out. So yeah.
There you go.
So yeah.
So thanks everyone for listening, especially if you've lasted the 2 hours and 42 minutes. That this has been being...
Comment below. This is a comment.
But this is a comment like last week. That was good. Likes are also appreciated. Reviews on various podcast platforms are appreciated. Obviously, the next thing we're going to be doing is reviewing the movie. Very exciting stuff. It's airing on my birthday, and I could not be happier. The only thing is that means it's tricky to schedule a podcast, but we'll work that out and we'll come back to you guys and we'll have a review, and it'll be, as Chris has pointed out in previous weeks, we'll probably do like an immediate reactions review that probably doesn't go into as much detail, or we sort of just pick apart our first thoughts about it. Vague review, probably just a lot of gushing, and then a more pragmatic review with like picking up details and the little hints and teasers and talking about the future of the show in some episodes that follow that. So I think there's gonna be a lot to go, and I think when the movie, I have a funny feeling when the movie airs, when it finishes, they're going to play a small promo bit straight after it that's going to give us an idea of what the future of the show is.
Yeah, I think so too.
Because it's starting to feel like they've made basically a season ahead of where we are right now.
Yeah, I know. And I don't know this for sure. I may be completely wrong. We've not discussed this at all. But 3 very long ones in a row, it might be that to have the time to dissect those Easter eggs properly, we do the review, and then like there's a week or 2 later, we then come back for the deep dive. Maybe. We don't know that for sure.
Yeah, give ourselves maybe we take a small break and come back when we've had a bit of time to digest it all properly. Yeah.
We don't know.
Yeah.
Just pre-warning that's reasonable.
Yeah, cool. So there you go. Still can't get over it. 2 hours and 45 minutes later. Thank you very much for listening to this. I've been Dan Doolin.
I've been Chris Billingham.
And we'll see you next week, assuming our girlfriends haven't murdered us.